Chapter 204. My disciple, the purpose of your trip down the mountain is to find the fate breaker. Remember, before that, don't move your Taoist heart. Once, late at night, Jing Chen woke up from his dream with a start. When he opened his eyes, there was only darkness. He raised his arm and pressed it against his sweaty forehead. His chaotic breathing gradually calmed down. He vaguely recalled the vague scene in his dream. After a while, he got out of bed, put on his outer robe, and sat at the desk to light the lamp. He spread out a piece of paper and wrote on it, "Fate Breaker, Taoist Heart." Jing Chen looked at the 5 words over and over again. He sat quietly in front of the table, deep in thought. It was only when he saw the sky outside the window and heard the door open that he folded the paper and pressed it against a Taoist scripture. Then he returned to the bed and lay down. Even though there was no news from Shui Rui's side, Yu Shu still made preparations for the Dian. Every day she would wake up an hour earlier than usual to memorize and practice her calligraphy. When the sky was slightly brighter, she would go out to the grocery store on the street and buy half a caddy of flatbread, 2 tails of salted vegetables and beans, and bring a pot of oil tea back to make breakfast. The weather was cold. Cooking in the kitchen during the day would be soaked in water, and it would be easy to freeze one's hands. Yu Shu was good at housekeeping, so she would not skimp on breakfast. After knocking on Jing Chen's door, Yu Shu went back to the room and woke Yu Xiaoxiu up. She put the bowls and chopsticks on the table. After breakfast, Yu Xiaoxiu went to school. Yu Shu cleaned the table and went to Jing Chen's room to change his dressing. The wound on Jing Chen's hand had been growing for a few days, and the stitches were almost closed. There were 2 deep cuts across the knuckles and the palm of his hand. They were so deep that they could be seen with the naked eye. It was a horrifying sight. Yu Shu carefully used a cotton cloth to clean the wound with hot water. As she sprinkled some medicinal powder on it, she asked, "Does it still hurt?" Jing Chen shook his head. He thought for a while and said, "It's a little itchy." Yu Shu warned, "It's a good thing to be itchy. It will heal slowly. Don't scratch it, understand?" "Yes." Jing Chen lowered his head and looked at Yu Shu, who was concentrating on wrapping his hands with a piece of cotton cloth. He suddenly asked, "Xiaoyu, I've mentioned to you before. Why did I descend the mountain and enter the human realm?" Yu Shu's hand movement paused and she said nonchalantly, "Why are you asking this? I remember when we were on the ship, I told you that I don't know much about you." If she remembered correctly, he once mentioned to her that he went down the mountain this time to find someone who could break his K-star fate. "Last night, I dreamt that my master in the mountain gate told me that I came down the mountain to find the fate breaker." Yu Shu suddenly looked up at Jing Chen. "Do you know what a fate breaker is?" Jing Chen looked confused. He couldn't understand the reminder in his dream even after thinking about it for half a night. Also, what did the heart of Tao refer to? Yu Shu was surprised. Of all the dreams he had, why did he have to dream about this? How was she going to explain it to him? Was she going to tell him the truth that his fate was against K-star, and that he would always bring trouble to others? Yu Shu couldn't make up her mind. She didn't tell Jing Chen before because she was afraid that he would avoid her once he knew the truth, just like when they were in Yang City. However, she couldn't keep hiding it from him. After all, they had been together for so long, and he had even made a written promise to her. Even if she really explained it to him, he might not just walk away. However, what was the use of telling him? As long as he didn't remember it, even if he knew who the fate breaker was, he wouldn't be able to find it. This kind of thing before he recovered his memory would only make him suffer a blow for nothing. Might not be good for him. It was better to keep it a secret. Even if he remembered it in the future and blamed her, she would accept it. It wasn't that Jing Chen didn't know how to read people's expressions. Yu Shu's hesitation made him realize that she seemed to be hiding something about him from him. "Xiaoyu, do you know something?" Yu Shu tilted her head. It was easy for her to make up a lie, but it was awkward to tell the truth. "Jing Chen, to be honest, I do know something about you, but it's not convenient to tell you. Let's wait until you remember it yourself." Jing Chen looked at Yu Shu's awkward expression and didn't want to make things difficult for her. At this time there was a knock on the door. Yu Shu was afraid that Jing Chen would ask again, so she quickly tied the gauze on his hand. "I'll go open the door." Yu Shu ran out and opened the door. When she saw a handsome man in a white satin coat, she almost slammed the door shut again. "Why do you look like you don't welcome me?" "Ah, of course not. I just didn't expect you to come so early in the morning." Yu Shu laughed awkwardly. That night at the alley, Shui Rui had given her an ambiguous answer. She still felt uncomfortable about it. "How can I not be early to give you good news?" Shui Rui handed a box of snacks to Yu Shu and walked around her. When he passed by Jing Chen's room, he didn't forget to stop and greet him. "Mr. Jing, is the injury on your hand better?" "Yes. Xiaoyu just changed my bandage." "That's good. I have something to talk to Shu about. I'll go in first." Every time they met, the two would only exchange a few words. They would never get tired of it. Shu closed the door and adjusted her expression before following Shui Rui into the house. She put down the box of snacks and said, "Take a seat first. It's cold. I'll make you a pot of hot tea. I'll leave after saying a few words. The sedan is waiting outside." Shui Rui raised his hand and gestured for Shu to sit down. He first looked around the house and didn't see any charcoal for the winter stove. He made a mental note of it and thought about what to bring next time he came. He didn't keep her in suspense. He directly took out an envelope from his fur collar and placed it on the table. He pushed it towards her. "You've done your job. This is your examination document. Keep it carefully and don't lose it. You can use it as a reference during the examination. After the examination you still have to use it to take the exam." Shu's face lit up. She picked up the envelope and took out the document inside. It was a rather exquisite piece of paper. The paper was slightly hard and white in color. There was a stamp on the bottom. There were words written on both sides. On one side there was the year of examination. At the bottom there was a large seal. It was the Celestial Commissioner's seal. On the other side there was the name and place of birth. At the bottom there were two smaller seals. They were the Imperial Commissioner and Registrar seals. Shu saw that below her name, Shu, there was a female word printed in a red circle. She thought that this was probably what Xia Mingming had said. The Dian trial was used to distinguish between male and female examinees. This was equivalent to an examination ticket in ancient times. Shu thought. Shui Rui said, "The first subject is Li. It starts on the first day of the 12th month. On that day, you only need to bring a brush and paper to the Imperial Commissioner. It is different from the Imperial examination. The men and women are separated into different departments. The examination starts on the same day and ends on the same day. The only thing is that you have to go hungry at noon. Food is not allowed in the Imperial Commissioner, but there is a supply of water. You only need to ring the bell to summon the invigilator." Shu had already inquired about the Dian trial from a Dai master. But after listening to Shui Rui's detailed explanation, she carefully noted it down. After the first subject, the second subject will be feng shui, astrology, physiognomy, occult arts, and finally arithmetic. The first four subjects are not necessarily written. Sometimes they will test on current affairs. I will send someone to the Imperial Commissioner to inquire about it. If there are any changes, I will inform you. You only need to wait patiently." Shu nodded. Knowing that it was best to have someone to help her, she did not decline. "Then I will have to trouble you to keep an eye on them for me. Why are you being so courteous?" "Today I have another matter that I need your help with." Shui Rui took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and handed it to Shu. "There are 2 sets of horoscopes on this. Can you help me read them in the next 2 days? See if these 2 people have any difficulties in the near future. Is that possible?" Shu took it. She did not inquire about whose horoscopes were written on it. She only smiled and said, "What's wrong with your request? If you are not in a hurry to leave, I will read it for you now. It will save you the trouble of traveling again." Shui Rui glanced outside and shook his head. "I have to make a trip to the government in the morning to see how the trial of the Taiheng Merchant Group's case is going, so I can't stay for long. I'll come look for you again the day after tomorrow." Hearing this, Shu's expression became serious. "Good. I wanted to ask why I did not hear anything. You can go take a look and tell me later." As long as Qiu Biao and Bai Qing were not punished, she would not be able to sleep well. It was best to finish this case as soon as possible and not let it be delayed until the Great Yen examination. As long as Qiu Biao and Bai Qing were not punished, she would not be able to sleep well. It was best to finish this case as soon as possible and not let it be delayed until the Great Yen examination. Shui Rui looked at his leisurely appearance and could not help but feel a bit envious. He had also lived this kind of life. Reading books to pass the time, sweeping the house, and also spending time with a certain simple-minded girl. There are other matters. I will come back another day. In a few days, when he was done with the matters at hand, he would look for an empty house nearby. He could not let them continue to live like this. Firstly, it was inconvenient. Secondly, he was worried. "Take care. I will go out and send him off," Shu said to Jing Chen. After sending Shui Rui out, she did not forget to close the door. Jing Jian looked at the closed door. His face showed a bit of loneliness. Who else was as idle as him? Shu sent Shui Rui to the entrance of the alley. Then she remembered that she had forgotten to say something. She was thinking if she should mention to Shui Rui about Ji Xingxuan's visit the day before yesterday. Shui Rui saw that she had something to say. What's wrong? Oh, it's nothing. You should go first. Don't miss the time. Forget it. Ji Xingxuan did not do anything to her. Instead, she teased her once. There was no point in learning her words. Shui Rui laughed. It's not a big deal. Say it. Yu Shu also laughed and waved at him. Why is there such a good thing? It's nothing. Let's go. When Shui Rui saw that she was not willing to say it, he thought that it was not something important. So he shook his head and walked away. After walking a dozen steps, he looked back and saw that she was still standing at the entrance of the alley. She did not turn around and walk away. He was in a good mood and his steps became lighter. Chapter 205. Shui Rui said he was going to inquire about the trial of the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce case. That night, a bailiff from the Yamen came to inform her to prepare for the trial the next day. Yu Shu readily agreed. Both Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen were very concerned about the case. The former was afraid that Bai Qing and Qiu Biao would be released again, while the latter wanted to accompany Yu Shu to the court for the trial. I'll go. I heard from young Master Shui that Bai Qing and Qiu Biao pushed the case of hijacking the ship onto the people who were rescued midway. Isn't that talking about you? The less trouble, the better. It's best if you don't show up before the case is over. Yu Shu dismissed the idea of accompanying Jing Chen. Then she recalled to Yu Xiaoxiu how they were forced to jump into the river to save themselves on the ship. She hated Qiu Biao and Qiu Biao so much that her teeth itched. She just wanted them to be executed the next day. After dinner they went back to their rooms to rest. Yu Shu was too excited to sleep because she was going to the court the next day. After lying down for a while, she simply got up to do some calculations. In the past few days she had been preparing for the exam. She had put aside the algorithm for finding the yellow frost stone as soon as she made some progress. Tonight she picked it up and continued to study it. She calculated a very strange phenomenon. Strange. How can I calculate it like this? The stone should be right beside me. It was clearly lost. Yu Shu touched her chin. After thinking about it, she could only say that she had calculated the wrong steps again. This method wouldn't work, so she had to find another way. Sighing to herself in pity, Yu Shu casually put aside the results she had calculated for most of the time. She pulled out a piece of paper and listed out all the numbers related to the yellow frost stone. She then used the algebra incantations of the 8 gates of life and death to find a suitable formula to reverse deduce it. Yu Shu slept in the middle of the night and woke up before the rooster crowed the next day. She was simply too excited to sleep, so she packed up and waited for the Yamen to call her. Not long after, an official came to the door. The court for the trial was located in the Yamen in the south of the city. It wasn't far and took less than an hour to get there. As soon as she entered the door, she heard a shout. Your Excellency, the witness of Yang Yu Shu has been brought. Yu Shu was still wondering if Shui Rui would come today. The moment she arrived at the entrance of the main hall, she looked inside. She saw a capital official wearing a black veil on his head sitting behind the official's desk, and there was a wooden table that was purposely placed at the side. The person sitting behind the table was Shui Rui, who was dressed in a vermilion official's robe. It wasn't the first time Yu Shu had seen him dressed in official robes, but every time she saw him in this robe, it was as if he was a different person. He was meticulous and proper and he looked quite dignified. Seeing him present, Yu Shu unconsciously felt a little more at ease. Presumably there wouldn't be any accidents with this case and it would be settled. When Shui Rui saw Yu Shu being brought in, he nodded slightly to her without anyone noticing. He turned to the official behind the table and said, Your Excellency Su, it's this person. When the merchant ship of the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce was robbed in July, he was lucky enough to escape. He also witnessed Bai Qiu and the others working with the water bandits to rob and murder. Only then did Yu Shu's line of sight fall on the few people kneeling on the ground in prison uniforms with disheveled hair. These few people were also turning their heads to look at her. It wasn't difficult to recognize the bearded Qiu Biao, and the other long-faced man who was staring at her unwaveringly must be Bai Qing. They had obviously been tortured in prison. All of their faces had scars, and the shackles on their hands and feet were bloody. However, after being locked up for a few days, their faces were sallow and their bodies emaciated from hunger. This was how it should be. Without the support of the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce, how could felons like them have an easy time in prison? After so many days seeing this old enemy again, Yu Shu felt nothing but joy. She wasn't afraid of Bai Qing and Qiu Biao's evil eyes and sneered, Boss Bai, you didn't expect this, did you? That night when I jumped into the river to escape from the ship, I ate the wind and dew in the forest, ate sparrow meat for half a month and still managed to survive. Bai Qing thought that he still had a trace of desire to live, so he didn't retort under Yushu's provocation. He bit his lips and endured it. Pa! Are you Yang's Yushu? Hearing the sound of the wooden block, Yushu stepped forward and bowed like a commoner, reporting to Sir, it is me. Do you recognize these few people kneeling? I'd recognize them even if they turned into ashes. Yushu used a classic line and pointed at Bai Qing and Qiu Biao. She raised her head and put on an indignant expression. It's these two people who secretly poached the merchant's goods and colluded with the bandits to murder the lives of all the passengers on the ship. I was lucky to escape and hid in the capital. Not long ago I ran into them again. They were afraid that I would expose their evil deeds, so not only did they sneak into my house in the middle of the night to harm me, they even hired assassins to kill me. Yushu's face flushed red. She cupped her hands toward Shui Rui and said gratefully, it is all thanks to Shui Daren's keen eyes that captured these villains on the spot. Otherwise, I would have died sooner or later and they would have gotten away scot-free. Shui Rui looked at Yushu's performance and almost couldn't hold back his laughter. He suppressed the corner of his mouth and nodded. He said to Su Daren, the Tai Hing Chamber of Commerce has thoroughly investigated Bai Qing. Su Daren has looked over the accounts just now. The accomplices have all confessed, proving that the robbery case in July and the other robbery case that happened in the southwest 3 years ago were all led by Bai and Qiu. Now that the witnesses and material evidence are here, Su Daren, please convict them. Before Yushu came, the trial of the case was almost over. Before the trial began, all the confessions had been collected. Her coming was just a formality. Other than her, there were 2 other stewards from the Tai Hing Chamber of Commerce present. They were sent by their masters to provide material evidence and listen to the trial. And the reason why Shui Rui was here to listen to the trial was because there was a clear provision in the law. If a person was sentenced to death, they must have the approval of the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Justice. Moreover, the officials of the 2 ministries must be present. Therefore, for this case, Shui Rui had put in a lot of effort to apply for the approval from the higher-ups before the trial began. Once the sentence was sentenced, the sentence could be directly pronounced and the report would be repeated later. This court is Yang County's Bai Qing, Qiu Biao, Su Lu, Friday and the others. Due to robbing a merchant ship in Kaifeng County Shangjiang Gorge in the 7th month of the 7th month, embezzlement, murder, and gain wealth, resulting in the death of 26 people and embezzlement of tens of thousands of yuan. After investigation, it has been proven that this is a heinous crime. Therefore, this official decrees that all of you will be stripped of your family's wealth. Bai Qing, Qiu Biao, Su Lu, and Friday will be executed at noon on the 3rd day of the 12th month of the 12th month. Guards, drag them away and throw them into the death row. The judge in the court, Lord Su, threw the match. Only then did Bai Qiu and the others know that they could not escape their doom. Some of them immediately wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves, loudly begging for mercy. Qiu Biao's face was ashen. On the other hand, Bai Qing, seeing that the situation was hopeless, finally showed signs of madness. Panting heavily, he was caught off guard and turned to face Yushu. He thought that half of his life's savings, painstakingly managed to fall into the hands of such a nobody. He was filled with regret and hatred. His eyes were bloodshot. He raised the heavy shackles in his hands and smashed them towards her head. Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. The bailiffs on both sides were not in a hurry to stop him. They only saw him pouncing towards Yushu. Shui Rui turned pale with fright. Without much time to think, he grabbed the jade paperweight on the table and was about to throw it towards Bai Qing's hands in an attempt to stop him. However, someone was faster than him. Yushu had gone out this morning to do her divination. She was already prepared for any accidents. She had been watching Qiu Biao and Bai Qing. When she saw that Bai Qing was about to attack, her eyes revealed a ruthless look. When he raised his hand to knock, she raised her leg and kicked the other's chest and abdomen with her thick soles with all her strength. Thud. Bai Qing had suffered in prison for a few days. How could he compare to her who worked every day and was full of energy? When she kicked him, he let out a muffled groan and fell to the ground. His head hit the ground hard and a mouthful of blood gushed out of his mouth. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. When everyone present saw this scene, including Shui Rui, they were all dumbfounded. Who would have thought that a witness would kick a criminal to the point of vomiting blood in a public court? After a moment, Shui Rui was the first to regain his senses. He sternly said, "Hurry and drag the criminal away." Yushu lightly stamped her numb legs and lowered her head. She smiled coldly at Qiu Biao, who was staring at her dumbfoundedly from a few steps away. Qiu Biao immediately shuddered and watched as Bai Qing was dragged away by the arm. His legs went soft as he was dragged away by the yamen runners, and he did not struggle at all. Shui Rui just happened to see Yu Shu's expression. His eyes flashed. He knew that she was already prepared. That kick just now was probably because she had been accumulating strength for a long time. Therefore, when she saw danger, she did not dodge and counterattack. He was both angry and happy at her guts. He did not show any expression on his face. He gently put the paperweight in his hand back on the table. He smoothed his sleeves and said to Su Darren, "Su Darren is wise. I will return to the Supreme Court to record the case. Please send someone to Kaifeng Prefecture to inform me." Shui Darren, rest assured. This official will handle it properly. Shui Rui took a copy of the statement from the advisor and left with the two yamen runners. When he passed by Yu Shu, he paused and said in a low voice, "I will settle the score with you after this." Yu Shu was immersed in the pleasure of venting her anger with that kick, and when this sentence entered her ears, her brows twitched. She turned her head around in bewilderment and looked at Shui Rui, who was leaving with large strides, and she was puzzled. What's the deal? Among the few spectators outside the yamen, a manservant saw that the case had been settled. He turned around and trotted away. He stopped at the corner of the street and climbed onto a horse carriage. He whispered to the window, "Second master, the case has been closed. The person has been sentenced to death." The person in the horse carriage seemed to let out a long sigh, and then let's go. No matter what, the hijacking of the ship was over. Bai Qing and Qiu Biao deserved their punishment. Yu Shu happily returned home. As soon as she opened the door, she told the good news to Jing Chen. "On the 3rd day of the 12th month, it's a good day. I don't have to take an exam that day, so I can go and watch." Yu Shu pulled Jing Chen's sleeve and entered his room. Coincidentally, there was a ready-made brush and ink on the table. She picked up the brush and wrote "on the 3rd day of the 12th month" on the paper and drew a circle. Jing Chen looked at the circle, thought for a moment and asked, "Can I go?" Yu Shu tilted her head. "You also want to watch a murder? Aren't you afraid of seeing blood and heads fall?" Jing Chen asked, "Aren't you afraid?" Yu Shu stopped smiling and said in a deep voice, "Of course I'm afraid. But no matter how scary it is, it can't be scarier than the bloody scene we saw when we escaped. However, I want to see how they die with my own eyes." It was to let her remember the painful lesson of the shipwreck and not to trust others easily. She turned her head and asked Jing Chen, "Do you also want to see how these two evil people get their retribution?" Jing Chen shook his head and said honestly, "I just want to accompany you." If she was afraid, at least there was someone beside her. Yu Shu blinked her eyes and smiled knowingly, "Okay, then let's go together. When the time comes, we can find a high place to watch the execution. I heard that there are many people watching the execution." Chapter 206. There were 6 subjects in the Dian examination: Yi, Feng Shui, astrology, physiognomy, strange arts, and arithmetic. Among the 6 subjects, only Yi was a compulsory subject. The other 5 subjects could be skipped because everyone had their own specialties. The Celestial Commissioner did not insist on learning all the subjects. After planning, Yu Shu decided that other than the Yi, she would also take the astrology, qigong, and arithmetic exams. She only knew the surface of physiognomy, and she had learned a lot about feng shui. She would also fail in the exams, so there was no need to waste her essence exam. In order to fight for a chance to enter the Taisher library, she would definitely spare no effort. Thinking about it, even if she did badly in the Yi exam, as long as she was outstanding in the other 3 subjects, she would not be buried. Under Jing Chen's guidance, Yu Shu's writing had a clear improvement. Although it was still far from being good, at least it wasn't unrecognizable. 3 days after the hijacking ship case, Shui Rui showed up again. He sent a servant to Yu Shu's house to call for people. Yu Xiaoxiu happened to be resting in the academy today, so Yu Shu asked him and Jing Chen to stay at home. She took the 2 pairs of horoscopes that Shui Rui asked her to calculate last time and went out. Shui Rui's horse carriage was parked at the corner of the street. Yu Shu pulled open the curtains and Shui Rui was sitting diagonally inside, reading a book. His hair was combed into a loose bun, and a few strands of hair hung down from his forehead, reflecting the light from the small window. His expression was relaxed and he truly looked distinguished and elegant. Today he did not wear his official uniform. He was wearing a dark green satin robe with flowing clouds, and a silver and white brocade belt around his waist was very eye-catching. His 2 long legs were crossed on the bunk, and the soles of his white boots were spotless. There were even 3 golden buttons on the edge of the shoes. He was as exquisite as he could be. Yushu rarely looked at him so carefully. Secondly, he never put on airs in front of her, so she ignored the fact that he was one of the top playboys in Anling City. The rice and salt he ate were more expensive than others since he was a child. The curtain opened and light came in. Shui Rui came back from the book and looked up. He saw Yushu's face by the door. He rolled up the book, put down his legs and sat up straight. He smiled and said to her, "Get in the carriage first." Hearing this, Yushu got into the carriage and sat beside him. She took out the 2 pairs of horoscopes and handed them to him. She explained, "Among these 2 people, one is quiet and has no fortune or misfortune. The other one is born at 2:45 in the morning. He will be in danger in half a month and will see blood. If he is your friend or acquaintance, you'd better remind him to be prepared." Yushu did not ask who these 2 people were and stopped talking. Shui Rui nodded and did not explain further. He put the horoscopes with Yushu's annotations into his sleeve and changed the topic. "How are you preparing these days? Are you confident that you can pass the exam? As long as one can get into the top 100 of the exam, he will pass the exam and get the Book of Mastery given by the Celestial Commissioner. If 2 subjects can get into the top 100, he will be a Master of Mastery. Of course, arithmetic is an exception." Yushu was not modest and only said the truth. "I will definitely pass the exam in arithmetic. As for the other subjects, I am confident that I can also pass astrology and the strange arts. But the results will depend on what the exam is about. It's a pity that I can't look at the past papers, so I have no idea." She was part of the generation that had been baptized by the high school and college entrance examinations 500 years in the future. She had a lot of experience with exams and knew what she lacked the most in the Great Yen examination. What she was most afraid of was being at a disadvantage in the exam. When Shui Rui heard this, Scroll lightly tapped her palm and said happily, "You and I are thinking the same thing. Let's go, I will take you to a good place." "Where are we going?" "Taisher Library." "What?" "Taisher Library has the past Great Yen examinations exam papers. I will find someone to sneak you in to read them so that you will have an idea." Yushu did not expect that Shui Rui would really take her to the entrance of Taisher Library. When they got out of the carriage, Feng Xiaomiao, the youngest son of the Jingwa general's residence, was waiting outside the 2 small doors. When he saw Shui Rui, he hurriedly greeted them. "You are late by half an hour. I thought you were not coming." He then turned his head and glanced at Yushu, who was dressed in a robe and a ribbon. He politely withdrew his gaze, nodded and said politely, "Hello, Miss Lianfeng." Fortunately, Yushu still remembered this person's name. "Hello, Mr. Feng." Shui Rui called Feng Xiaomiao to the side, and he instructed in a low voice. "Bring her to the treasury and be careful not to lose her. It's inconvenient for me to enter, so I'll come pick her up in the afternoon." People were not allowed to enter the Imperial Historian's study garden easily, and even Shui Rui had only entered it a few times to investigate a case. Moreover, after Xia Jiangying was murdered, the control over it became even stricter, and it was easier said than done to bring someone in. It was only because Feng Xiaomiao's relationship with Shui Rui was strong enough that he was willing to go against the rules. Feng Xiaomiao smiled and said, "Brother Rui, rest assured. How can I mess up what you have asked me to do? Let's have a drink together in the evening. I have booked a private room at the Huifeng restaurant and called Second Brother Qi." "It is not convenient today. I have something to do tonight. How about tomorrow? I will treat you." Shui Rui patted him on the shoulder. Feng Xiaomiao looked disappointed. "Well, it is a deal. You are not allowed to run away tomorrow." "Okay." The 2 walked back to Yushu. Feng Xiaomiao stretched out his hand to lead the way and said to Yushu, "Miss, come with me. If you see anyone later, just answer to me. You don't have to pay attention to them." Yushu turned her head to look at Shui Rui. Shui Rui nodded and said to her, "If there is anything you are not clear about, just ask Xiaomiao. He is someone who has taken the Dian examination. Go, I will pick you up in the afternoon." Of course, Yushu would not miss the opportunity to see the collection of books in Taisher Library. She thanked him and nodded to him. Then she followed Feng Xiaomiao into Taisher Library. Feng Xiaomiao must have informed the guard and entered the door with Yushu unimpeded. This was the second time for Yushu to enter Taisher Library. The first time was when Xia Jiangying was killed. She followed Xia Mingming there when she was handling a case at the Supreme Judiciary. After passing through a long winding corridor, the lower corridor was a different world. Flowers and trees withered in winter, but both sides of the road were covered with pine needles and holly. It was lush and green, not cold. After passing through a winding corridor, there were courtyards and small buildings in the distance. They were all the same, with glazed tiles, white walls, rockery corridors, stone screens and painted walls. They were either in front of the courtyard or by the side of the road. It was as if they had just passed by and turned back. Being in it, it was like entering a maze. One's head and tail could not be seen. An expert could see the knack here. Yushu had some knowledge of feng shui. She could roughly see that there was a formation hidden in the layout of Taisher Library. It was a strange combination of illusion and reality. Along the way they met a few people. Regardless of gender, they were all young and outstanding. Seeing that Feng Xiaomiao was bringing Yushu, they could not help but ask curiously. Feng Xiaomiao answered them all like this: "Oh, it is Master Zhou who asked me to bring this young master to see him. I don't know what it is for." This must be a lie, but the others did not doubt it. Seeing that he was in a hurry, they did not ask any more questions and let them go. Feng Xiaomiao did not know whether it was due to the difference between men and women or other reasons, but he did not take the initiative to talk to Yushu. He only looked back from time to time to make sure that she was still behind him and did not get lost. Yushu carefully studied the feng shui of Taisher Library along the way. Similarly, she did not have time to chat. After walking for at least the time to drink a cup of tea, Feng Xiaomiao finally led her to the place. In front of her was a pavilion, standing by the lake. It was 2 stories high and was octagonal in shape with a balcony on one side. On the door there was a plain horizontal board with the 2 words, "Carrying Tao," written on it. The 2 corners of the board were hung with ribbons, and on the red ribbons were 4 pairs of 8 trigrams. Yin and yang intersected, black and white alternated. There was no one guarding the door. Looking from outside, there was only an old man holding a feather duster sweeping the dust on the window. At this point, Yushu could not help but ask, "Is this the pavilion?" Feng Xiaomiao saw that there was no one around and stopped in front of the door to explain to her in a low voice, "There are 4 pavilions in Taisher Library, and this Carrying Tao Tower is only one of them. It is specially used to store the lectures of the past 100 years, the Yili chapters of the past dynasties. Other than that, the 2nd floor also stores the questions of the 6 examinations of the Great Yen examination every year for people to look up." Yushu nodded, feeling surprised. She only knew that there was one pavilion in Taisher Library that had a rich collection, but she did not know that there were as many as 4. From the sound of it, this Carrying Tao Tower seemed to be the most unremarkable one. Feng Xiaomiao saw that there were people coming this way from not far away. He waved his hand at Yushu and said, "Okay, follow me in. Don't talk too much to whoever you see." Entering this ancient library, Yushu felt that her eyes were not enough to see. The 1st floor was spacious and the bookshelves were all against the wall, leaving only the window. The empty hall was covered with a thick carpet, and walking on it was silent. Perhaps because of the passage of time, the patterns on the carpet had become blurred, but it was still clean without a single stain, and there was still the scent of old books in the air. The old man sweeping the dust might have been seeing things, for he did not even see who had come in. He only bent his back and cleaned the dust on the bookshelves over and over again. The staircase was in the southeast, and it was also covered with carpet. Yushu followed Feng Xiaomiao up to the 2nd floor. This floor was even clearer. There were only 2 rows of bookshelves against the wall, and the rest were short, square-legged bookcases. They were small, not even the height of a person, and could be reached by stretching out one's hand. Coincidentally, there was not a single person on the 2nd floor, and they could even hear the echo when they spoke. Feng Xiaomiao led Yushu through the rows of bookshelves, bending down to search for the stamps on the bookshelves. Finally he found a row and happily clicked his tongue. He squatted down to open the bookshelf and took out an old scroll. He glanced at it with the light and raised his hand to pass it to Yushu. He said with a smile, "This is the 15th year of Feng Shun. It's a little old. You take it first and I'll find the recent ones for you." Yushu took it, and saw that the title of the scroll was marked with the word, De Yen. She couldn't wait to open it. The first one was Yi Li and the title was Yin Flourishes and Yang Declines, so the dynasty does not take it. To her surprise, there was actually a student's paper attached at the bottom. As a result, Yushu placed the scroll on the shelf, and lowered her head to carefully read it. Feng Xiaomiao, on the other hand, sat on the carpet and rummaged through the bookshelves on the left and right. When he saw a scroll that he was interested in, he would also stop to read it. Unknowingly, the 2 of them had stayed here for the whole morning, until the 2nd floor's library came again. You look from this side and I'll look from that side. We must find all the papers from the Feng Shun era." Chapter 207. The second floor was spacious, and the shelves on the second floor were all shorter than a person's height. As soon as someone spoke, they could hear an echo. Yushu and Feng Xiaomiao both heard the voices coming from the second floor. Yushu put down the scroll in her hands. It can't be so coincidental, right? Yushu turned her head and stood on her tiptoes to take a look. Her line of sight passed through the rows of shelves and saw two female students in yellow standing at the staircase talking. She even recognized one of them. What a coincidence. Feng Xiaomiao immediately sat up from the ground and looked outside. When she saw who it was, she quickly retracted her head and gently pulled Yushu's sleeve. She winked at her and waved her hand at her to tell her not to make a sound. She pointed to the rows of bookshelves behind her, silently signaling her to hide first. Yushu understood. She casually grabbed the file that she had just been reading and bent down to hide under the bookcase. She quietly moved back. Feng Xiaomiao quickly closed the few open bookcases and also bent down to follow her. There were at least 100 shelves on the second floor, so it wasn't difficult to hide here. Yushu and Feng Xiaomiao went under the shelves on the northernmost side and hid behind them. There was an aisle that was as wide as 2 arms' length between them. Feng Xiaomiao pricked up her ears and listened. She covered her mouth with one hand and whispered to Yushu on the other side of the aisle, "Unlucky. It's Zhao Lu-er and Ji Xingxuan. Ji Xingxuan has seen you before. I have a grudge against Zhao Lu-er, so I can't let her find out that I sneaked in with someone else. Otherwise she'll definitely make trouble for me. Let's hide first and find a chance to sneak out later." Yushu nodded. She and Ji Xingxuan also had a grudge against each other. In this kind of situation, it would be best if she could avoid meeting Ji Xingxuan. Otherwise, if Ji Xingxuan saw her here, it would be hard to guarantee that she wouldn't cause trouble. Just as she was thinking about this, they heard footsteps approaching their hiding place. They walked on the carpet and stopped after a few steps. They must be searching the shelves nervously. Yushu and Feng Xiaomiao looked at each other. Feng Xiaomiao slightly poked her head out and quickly retracted it. She gently waved to Yushu and pointed behind her. She mouthed, "They're coming. Go to the back." Yushu stuffed the file in her hand into her cotton-padded jacket, pressed her hands on the ground and crawled to an aisle at the back. Feng Xiaomiao nimbly leaped over and followed closely behind her. "Sister Xingxuan, I found it. It's here. Come quickly." A woman's shout came from the aisle, and there was hidden joy in her voice. Then there was a burst of hurried footsteps. Yushu knew it was Ji Xingxuan coming this way. She crawled a few steps forward and heard the footsteps slow down. "Sister, look, it's the exam paper from the Feng Shanera, right?" Zhao Luer excitedly took out a file from the bookcase and showed it to the person opposite her. "Shu, lower your voice." Ji Xingxuan warned her in a low voice. But when she saw the signature on the file, her eyes lit up with joy. "What are you afraid of?" Mu Xiu, everyone in the study garden went to visit the headmaster, who would come to the Dao-carrying building for no reason. "Alright, hurry up and find all the files from the Feng Shanera. Look through them and see where the exam paper is." The two girls stood in front of the bookcase and searched. At the other end of the bookcase, Yushu and Feng Xiaomiao were hiding and happened to crawl past. Hearing their conversation, their curiosity was aroused. They stopped at the same time and pricked up their ears to eavesdrop. There was only one thought in their mind. What were they looking for? After about 5 minutes, Yushu heard the strange girl's disappointed voice again. "There's nothing in these 2 files. What about yours?" "I don't think so. If I looked carefully, I might have missed it." The voice was close to the wall. Yushu's eyelids suddenly twitched. Curious, she turned her head and saw a gap between the bookcases. She couldn't help but move closer and peep through the gap. First, she saw a coral red skirt. She looked up and saw a white hand holding a red paper scroll. Behind the scroll, only half of a veiled nose could be seen. "Let's go." Feng Xiaomiao's soft voice drifted into her ears. Yushu was about to retract her gaze when she saw something out of the corner of her eye. She saw a snow-white wrist flipping through a book on the other side of the cupboard. The sleeve slid down, revealing a red string. A touch of lustrous yellow jumped out. Yushu's eyes suddenly widened. She stared unblinkingly at the small yellow bead falling from the red string. Gradually, it overlapped with a round little thing in her memory. Yellow frost, is it the yellow frost stone? Feng Xiaomiao saw that Yushu was stunned and didn't leave. Fearing that she would be discovered later, she pulled Yushu's sleeve again. Yushu suddenly came to her senses. She lowered her head and frowned. Without saying a word, she followed Feng Xiaomiao out of the corridor and trotted downstairs. Feng Xiaomiao stuck her head out from the corner of the stairs. Seeing that there was no one downstairs, she beckoned to Yushu and the two of them ran out of the Dao-bearing tower like rabbits. The hunchbacked old man, who was standing under the bookshelf sorting out the scrolls, turned his head and looked at the door that the two of them ran out of. His old eyes were glazed over and he coughed twice. On the second floor, only Ji Xingxuan and Zhao Luer were left. They had flipped through the Feng Shanira's papers, but they didn't find what they were looking for. Zhao Luer bit her finger and muttered, "What's going on?" Master clearly said that the Dian exam paper for Yunhua Ez was placed in the Feng Shanera. Did I hear it wrong? Ji Xingxuan didn't make a sound. She looked at the stack of scrolls on the bookshelf and thought for a moment. Then she looked for the dates and months marked on each of the scrolls and found a problem. The scroll for the 18th year is missing. Ah? A scroll is missing? Zhao Lioni hurried over to take a look. Ji Xingxuan handed the scroll to her, then stood on her tiptoes and looked around. Her gaze fell on a wrinkle on the carpet not far away. Her expression suddenly changed and she strode towards the stairs. "Hey, where are you going? Aren't you going to look for it?" Zhao Luer called out from behind her. Seeing that Ji Xingxuan didn't respond, she could only shove the scrolls into the bookshelf and jog to catch up with her. The two of them went down to the second floor. Ji Xingxuan stood on the stairs and looked around. She found the back of the old man who was sorting out the books. She quickly walked down the stairs and asked, "Uncle Qin, did anyone come to the Dao-bearing tower and go up to the second floor?" The old man slowly turned around. His two cloudy eyes seemed to be unable to see people clearly. He raised his eyelids and carefully looked at Ji Xingxuan. Then he tilted his head and put one hand over his ear, asking loudly, "What did you say?" Ji Xingxuan lowered her head and raised her voice. "I'm asking you, did anyone go up to the second floor just now?" This time the old man heard an "oh" and replied slowly, "No." Then he coughed twice and turned back to his work. Zhao Luer pulled on Ji Xingxuan's arm and asked nervously, "What happened?" Ji Xingxuan said in a low voice, "That scroll must have been taken away by someone else." What? Feng Zhaomiao led Yushu out of the Dao-bearing tower and stopped a long distance away. He patted his chest and panted, "That was close, that was close. If that stupid girl saw me, I would have been in big trouble. No wonder my eyelids kept twitching this morning." Yushu also rested her feet on the railing. She turned her head to look at the location of the treasure that was set up by the lake. Her eyes flashed thoughtfully, and her heart was filled with doubt and confusion. Unless she was blind, there was another stone that looked exactly the same in this world. Otherwise, the one she saw just now must be the yellow frost stone that Jing Qin gave her. But how did it fall into the hands of Ji Xingxuan? Could it be that she found it after she lost it in Yang City? That wasn't impossible. She carefully thought back to the days when she lost the yellow frost stone. Yu Xiaoxiu had visited the Ji family and heard that Ji Xingxuan had returned home from the capital. Her days were not bad. But why did she have to be so lucky to have picked it up by herself? Yushu was depressed. Look at the other person's luck and then look at her own. The other person randomly picked up a treasure, but she didn't even know what it was and lost it in a muddle. Now how could she get the yellow frost stone back? She could directly find Ji Xingxuan and explain to her, "You picked up my thing, now return it to me." This would most likely not work. Ji Xingxuan had eyes. She could see that Ji Xingxuan used a red string to thread the bead and carried it with her. She knew that Ji Xingxuan knew what it was. Even if she didn't know the origin of the yellow frost stone, she knew that it was a good thing. Otherwise, why would the fourth miss of the Ji family randomly carry a small stone with her? She was afraid that Ji Xingxuan knew what it was. In this world, there were only a few people who didn't pocket money they picked up. Even if she was a petty person, if Miss Ji was a noble person and would rather return the stone to its owner, she would have no way to prove that she lost the stone. Besides, not long ago Ji Xingxuan asked her to teach her the 6 lines cutting method. She even played a trick on her. Who knew if Ji Xingxuan was as narrow-minded and vengeful as her? It would be good if she didn't take the opportunity to make things difficult for her. Give it back to her and keep dreaming. Feng Zhaomiao looked at Yushu shaking her head and sighing alone. She thought that she was regretting that she couldn't read more papers, so she comforted her. "It's okay. Come back tomorrow. I will take you in again." Hearing this, Yushu had an idea and asked, "This is not safe. What if I encounter a situation like today again? Isn't it scary enough? Can't you take a few files out for me to read?" Feng Zhaomiao shook her head without thinking. "How can I do that? You don't know that the books in Taisher Library are absolutely not allowed to be taken out. They can't even leave the building. Once you are caught, you can forget about staying in school. Otherwise, why would I take the trouble to sneak you in? I can just find those files for you to read." "I see." Yushu nodded with understanding. She thought that the rules of this Taisher library were quite strict. No wonder there was no one to look after such a big place. There was only an old man to clean it. They were not afraid of people stealing books. It turned out that there was such a severe punishment. As long as you were caught stealing a book, you would be expelled from school. It was really terrible. Let's go. Maybe Brother Rue is already waiting for you outside. Okay. Not far from the gate, Feng Xiaomiao sent Yu Shu out. Shui Rue hadn't arrived yet. Feng Xiaomiao happened to meet an acquaintance and was dragged to drink. Seeing the child's hesitant face, Yu Shu knew that he wanted to play with someone, so she took the initiative to let him go first and made an appointment to come back tomorrow morning. As soon as Feng Xiaomiao left, Yu Shu didn't stand alone at the door in the cold wind. Instead, she went to the tea house across the street. She didn't eat lunch, so she felt hungry. She asked for a pot of hot tea and snacks. When she reached into her pocket, she felt a roll of paper. She hurriedly took it out and saw that it was a dossier she had stuffed into her bosom. Because she was wearing thick winter clothes, she had forgotten about it. Chapter 208. Yu Shu had been sitting in the tea house for about 15 minutes when Shui Rue's carriage appeared on the street. She put down the silver and ran downstairs to his carriage. Shui Rue was still alone in the carriage. How was it? Did you get anything? Shui Rue asked. And I was able to see the past examination questions. My confidence has increased. I told Feng Gongzi to come back tomorrow. Yu Shu nodded. She did not tell him about the file in her bosom. She thought that she would come back tomorrow and sneak it back. Shui Rue said, I have business to attend to tomorrow and cannot accompany you. I will send a sedan chair to the south of the city to pick you up. There's no need to go through so much trouble. I'll do it myself. I know the way and I know the people. Are you still afraid that I'll get lost? Yu Shu looked at Shui Rue and suddenly realized that he had changed his clothes. She clearly remembered that he was wearing an ink-colored shirt in the morning, but now he was wearing a cyan shirt. The shiny silver hooked belt on his waist had also been replaced by a black leather belt. She pointed at him and teased, You change 2 or 3 sets of clothes a day. Don't you find it troublesome? Shui Rue looked down at himself. He cleared his throat and explained as if nothing had happened. The one in the morning was dirty. I had to go home again. As he spoke, he picked up the teapot and poured a cup of water for her. He changed the topic. Try it. This is the tea you praised last time. I brought a bag with me. You can take it home later. All right. Yu Shu did not know how precious the tea leaves were. She took the teacup after she responded and took 2 small sips. However, the tip of her nose caught a whiff of an elegant fragrance that was different from the fragrance of tea. It was a strange smell that she did not know. She took another sip and smelled the smell. She realized that this strange fragrance was not the smell of tea but the smell of the cup. In other words, it was the smell of Shui Rue's hands. She slowly drank the tea and raised her eyes to secretly size up Shui Rue. It wasn't difficult to notice that not only had his clothes changed, even his hair seemed to have been combed again. The hairpin was not the same as the one she saw during the day. Lowering her eyes, Yu Shu's mouth twitched slightly behind the cup. When Yu Shu returned home, Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen were both there. After thinking about it, she felt that it was necessary to tell Jing Chen that she had seen the yellow frost stone today. So, while she was cooking dinner, she asked Yu Xiaoxiu to go to the kitchen to make a fire to boil water. Then she pulled Jing Chen back into the house and closed the door. She turned around and stretched out 2 index fingers to Jing Chen. Jing Chen, now I have good news and bad news for you. Which one do you want to hear first? Jing Chen looked at her index fingers and pointed to the left. All right. Yu Shu put away the finger and said with a smile, I found the location of the adversity blocking stone you gave me. Jing Chen was surprised at first, but he was not in a hurry to inquire about its whereabouts. Instead, he pointed to her right index finger that was still standing upright. What about the bad one? Yu Shu's face suddenly fell. That stone is in the hands of someone else. They may not give it back to us. Jing Chen said, Who has it? You don't know. Yu Shu crossed her arms and leaned against the door. She said with a worried voice, I think the other party should recognize that your adversity blocking stone is a good thing, so she carries it with her. But I have some conflicts with that person. If I really ask for it, she will not return it. You have to think of a way. There is such a person. Jing Chen frowned. What should we do? Who are you asking? Yu Shu couldn't help but laugh. Looking at his serious expression, she couldn't help but tease him. She pulled his wide sleeves and said with a frown, Didn't you tell me last time that if I have any troubles I will tell you? You also said that you will help me think of ideas. Then, you should help me solve my troubles and think of a way to get the disaster-blocking stone back. Hearing this, Jing Chen's eyes changed. He nodded and said seriously, then don't be anxious. Let me think about it. All right. Yu Shu lowered her head and smiled secretly. She was really curious about what ideas he would come up with. Jing Chen didn't think for long and had an idea. You ask that person to come out. After explaining, if he is not willing to return it, I will take action and take back the adversity-blocking stone. Is it not good? Yu Shu's eyes twitched. How is this bad idea good? This is robbery. If we are reported to the court, we will have to go to jail. Jing Chen said, it is originally ours. It is just returning it to its rightful owner. Yu Shu said, that is right, but empty words must be believed. Today we ran in front of someone and said that the stone is ours and asked for it. Tomorrow someone ran in front of us and said that the stone is his. Do we still have to give it to him? Jing Chen thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. His expression was slightly depressed. Yu Shu patted his arm and comforted him. It is okay. We will think of other ways. Let's eat first. Anyway, now we know where the adversity-blocking stone is. It is better than not knowing anything. After dinner, Yu Shu boiled half a pot of hot water and washed the dishes. After washing up early, she went into the house and took out the examination files that she accidentally brought out from the Imperial Historian's library and continued to read. For a while, she couldn't think of a way to get back the yellow frost stone. It was more important to do other things first. Every year, the dossier of the De Yen examination had 6 subjects. Sometimes it was a written test, just like the Ely examination, which required people to analyze their theories. Sometimes it was a time test, just like the physiognomy examination, which required the examinees to look at their faces and answer the questions. Not only did the paper record the questions, but it also included a student's paper. The handwriting was different, and there was a circle on the paper with the word middle. Obviously, the owner of the paper was not a top 3 in every subject, but it was within 100 yuan. The file in her hands was from the 18th year of Feng Shun. After calculating, there were 2 emperors and it had been almost 40 years. No wonder the paper was thin and waxy and some parts were blurred. The dossier had a total of 20 to 30 pages. Yu Shu only skimmed through the easy-to-read part of the book a few times, then flipped to the part that she was interested in. She began to read it carefully. The questions were of a high standard. Although it wasn't as difficult as the college entrance examination a few hundred years later, the overall level of the questions was balanced. Out of the 20 questions, not a single one was a free pass. Some of the calculations were quite complicated. Even if Yu Shu were to do this paper, she wouldn't be able to finish it without 2 to 4 hours, and this was under the condition that the accuracy of the calculations wasn't calculated. As expected of the Dayan examination, Yu Shu looked through a few years' worth of files. She knew that it wasn't easy, so she couldn't help but sigh. However, there was also something that made her secretly happy. It seemed that the mathematics exam didn't require the process of solving the problem to be written on the paper. She had seen a few students' exam papers that only had the results written on them, which was exactly what she wanted. Otherwise, she was afraid that if she wrote down the process of solving the problem, the examiner would mistake it as nonsense. Yu Shu thought that she would try these questions later. She flipped to the next page and saw that it was the astrology exam, so she paid attention. This was a subject she had to take. When she was in Yang City, Taoist Qing Zheng taught her how to identify the 3 permanents, 4 symbols and 28 mansions, and she watched the stars every night until her neck cramped every day. She couldn't let all that hard work go to waste. Even if the Dayan examination was full of hidden talents, and the chance of getting into the top 100 was not high, she still had to try. The Feng Shun 18th year astrology exam was a time test. The file recorded that on the night of the 15th of the 12th lunar month, 739 candidates gathered at Donghua Pavilion to watch the stars. They recorded for 2 hours, and 18 officials of the Big Dipper Division under the Celestial Commissioner watched the stars and recorded at the same time. The one who recorded the most stars and recorded the most accurately would be rewarded 100 yuan. When Yu Shu was in the Dao carrying building, she had read some files from 3 or 4 years ago. The astrology exam questions were generally the same. They learned and applied, and they extracted star news on the spot. Attached at the back was a student's exam paper that was densely filled with notes. Yu Shu lost interest after reading a few pages. She flipped the page and was about to look for the exam questions of the magic arts course when a piece of white paper jumped into her eyes. In fact, this piece of paper was not white at all. Instead, it looked much younger and cleaner because it was sandwiched in a roll of blurred and withered paper. On this piece of paper the handwriting was flowing like the clouds. Compared to the examinee's paper on the previous page, it was much more concise. This was because there was only one line written on it. Yushu read it out softly, "There will be a son in this year who will bring great fortune and disaster." After reading this sentence, Yushu made a hiss sound and checked this different piece of white paper over and over again. There were no red marks on it, and there were no red words. The corners were worn and there were traces of binding, but it was not in the original exam paper. On the edge there was a line of small words which read, "Baotai 12th year 12th month Changzhou Yin Mufeng." Yushu looked at the small words suspiciously. This was clearly a student's exam paper from the early years, but why was it written Baotai 12th year? Wasn't she holding the exam paper from the 18th year of Fengshan? Baotai, this is the era name of an emperor in the Dan. Yushu counted with her fingers and determined that this exam paper was from about 20 years ago. Facing this Baotai exam paper from the Great Yen examination of the Fengshan year, Yushu made a hiss sound and suddenly remembered that during the day in Tibet, Ji Xingxuan and another girl were furtively looking through the second floor. They seemed to be looking for this Great Yen exam paper from the Fengshan year. Could it be that what they were looking for was this exam paper in her hands? Or, to be more precise, what they were looking for was this exam paper from the Baotai year. Yushu narrowed her eyes and looked down at the lonely line of words on the exam paper. Her suspicions grew. Her intuition told her that there must be some secret hidden in this exam paper. After thinking for a while, Yushu separated this unusual exam paper from the other files, carefully folded it in half, put it in a book and put it in a drawer. She prepared a brush and ink and wrote on the paper, "Baotai 12th year Yin Mufeng." Tomorrow when she went to Tibet again she would look through the files from the 12th year of Baotai. She wanted to see which subject this mysterious exam paper in her hands answered. And this Yin Mufeng, what kind of god was he? Chapter 209. The next day Yushu went to Taisher Library again. She purposely woke up early to walk to the northern part of the city. Feng Zhaomiao was one step ahead of her, waiting for her outside the library with a bundle in his hand. When he saw her he waved. "Miss Lianfeng." Yushu had heard him address her like this several times, but she didn't correct him. Walking forward, she saw him hand over the bundle in his hand and asked in confusion, "This is?" "I found a student robe for you. It's brand new and hasn't been worn before. Put it on over your clothes. If you run into someone in the library again, it'll be easy to fool them." Feng Zhaomiao gestured with his hands. Yushu understood and didn't stint on her praise. "You're quite thoughtful." Feng Zhaomiao chuckled proudly. As a result he went to take a walk. Yushu found a nearby tree to hide under. She shook out the white silk robe from the bundle and put it on over the padded jacket. She thought to herself that Feng Zhaomiao looked careless, but he was actually quite meticulous. Not only did he prepare clothes, but he also prepared a set of belts and hair bands. Disguised as a male student of the library, Yushu followed Feng Zhaomiao into Taisher Library. Along the way she felt a lot more confident. It saved her the time to stop and explain to others. The two quickly arrived in front of the Dao-carrying tower that stood on the shore of the lake. Taisher Library had been closed for 2 days. Today there were a few students in the Dao-carrying tower, but they were all on the first floor. The second floor was still quiet and empty. Yushu found this very strange. The Dayan examination was imminent, and many of the students of Taisher Library would be taking the examination for the second time. Why was there no one here to look at the questions? She asked Feng Zhaomiao about this. Feng Zhaomiao laughed. "Haha, most of the people taking the examination are students who have been in the library for 3 years. They can't even finish their homework all day. Who would have the time to look at the previous examination questions? Brother Rui mentioned it and said he wanted you to see what the Dayan examination was about. That's why I brought you here. Of the 4 libraries in the library, this Dao-carrying tower is the most deserted." Yushu nodded. That was true. There were at least 5,000 students taking the Dayan examination each year. Most of the people taking the examination for the first time were clueless. There were only a few people who had connections with her to enter the Dao-carrying tower to read the previous year's questions. This was something that was impossible. On the other hand, the students of the Taisher Library had all participated in the Dayan examination. These people had a lot of reference experience. In addition, the examinees of this ancient era did not have the awareness of simulating the examination papers before the examination, so their learning was more rigid. As a result, no one favored this library full of real questions. "I forgot to ask yesterday, Did you participate in this year's De Yen examination? Yushu asked Feng Zhamiao. To her surprise, he actually shook his head. Why not reference? I heard you entered the Dao carrying tower during the last Dian examination. You've been studying here for 3 years. Feng Zhamiao gloomily said, My father arranged for me to work in the army next year. It's pointless for me to take the examination. I won't be able to become a celestial commissioner in the future. No one in the family agrees with me learning Yi. When Yushu recalled that this young man was a great general of the Yin dynasty, she understood him a little. Looking at his dejected expression, she knew that she had brought up something she shouldn't have. She comforted him, Actually, it's more important to learn something. You are proficient in Yi Shui. You might be able to put it to good use in the army. Think about it, the rarer something is, the greater its value. In a place where everyone is a talented general, isn't it amazing that you are the only Yi Shui? She didn't mean it. Feng Zhamiao felt enlightened after hearing it. He was stunned for a moment. He suddenly clapped his hands and said, That's right. Ah, this is even more amazing. Yushu was startled by the sound of him clapping. She was afraid that he would attract someone's attention. She quickly whispered to him, Let's get down to business in case we bump into someone we know. Yes, let's go. Feng Zhamiao smiled and led Yushu to the bookshelves. His attitude towards her was obviously friendlier than before. There were more than 100 bookshelves on the second floor. Among the books, the Dian examination paper only occupied a small portion. They were not categorized carefully. Thus it took some time to find them. While Feng Zhamiao was busy rummaging through the bookcase, Yushu stuffed the file from the Feng Shan era that she brought out last night back into the cabinet next to her. She was still thinking about finding the test paper from the 12th year of Baotai. She wanted to match it with the paper she found last night, so she told Feng Zhamiao and went to the other bookcase to look for it. Hard work paid off. After searching more than 20 bookshelves, Yushu finally found the Baotai examination paper. She took out the 12th year's file and couldn't wait to sit on the ground to check the questions. There were 6 subjects in total. It was not difficult to find the corresponding question with the mysterious paper. Because among these 6 subjects, Yushu only found one subject with a single question. As she expected, it was the question of astrology. The file recorded, Baotai 12th year, the 16th of the 12th month of the 12th month, in Taiching Division. The first question was the solution. The Zhongqian Kong Su, the North Wei Su, the South Ghost Su. The 3 stars were destroyed today and yesterday. If Yushu had to answer this question, she admitted that she couldn't answer it. In astrology, it was usually a subjective sign of 1 star or 2 stars in the same constellation palace as a reference. However, this question not only involved 3 stars but also 3 different constellation palaces. The positions of the north and the south were completely different. There was no connection between the 3 constellation palaces. However, it was imaginable how difficult it was to link them together. There will be a sun in this year. Is it because of the great fortune and disaster? Yushu softly muttered a sentence on the paper that she had seen last night. She didn't know why, but she felt that the strange answer written on the paper should be the correct answer to this question. Yun Mufeng, the person who could solve this question should not be a nobody. Why was his examination paper sandwiched with the examination paper of another year? Yushu stared at the record on the file thoughtfully. She repeated the name Yun Mufeng over and over again. Suddenly she had a flash of inspiration. If she remembered correctly, a long time ago someone mentioned to her that more than 20 years ago, there was an extremely talented Ez who was born in the Yin dynasty. His appearance was short-lived and his name was Yun Hua. Could it be this Yun Mufeng? Every year before the new year, the celestial commissioner would be very busy. This year was especially busy because the triennial Dian examination was about to begin. In order to ensure that the examination of the 6 subjects would be carried out smoothly, almost all the officials from the various departments had to leave early and return late. As the right magistrate, Ji Huaishan also had the responsibility of supervising this year's Dian examination. More than 20 Yi masters who were responsible for setting the questions had been detained in Langxiang Yuan in October. No one was allowed to spy on them. Several supervising examiners took turns to patrol and supervise them. Yesterday, Ji Huaishan was temporarily sent to Langxiang Yuan by the young supervisor. He only returned to the mansion the next morning. After a night of exhaustion, he didn't go to sleep. Instead, he asked his servants to bring Ji Xingxuan to the study room. He closed the door and left some attendants to guard outside. The grandfather and grandson had a secret discussion. How was it? Did you find the examination paper of Yun Huazi? Ji Huaishan looked a little anxious. Ji Xingxuan shook her head. Ji Huaishan frowned. What's going on? You couldn't find it? Ji Xingxuan said, Lu went to Master Zong to find out. Among the 3 subjects that Yun Huazi took, the astrology examination paper was sandwiched in the Feng Shun period. Master Zong is old and his memory is blurred. He only said that the late Sir Qin mentioned this to him, but he doesn't know which volume it is. We searched the Dao carrying building and found that the Feng Shun period's volume was missing. I suspect that it was taken away by someone. That's impossible. Ji Huaishan denied it without thinking. He lowered his voice and said, Xian grandfather has gone to great lengths to bring up this question. You don't know how strict the security in Longxiang court is. Even a fly that flies out is recorded. Other than me and your uncle Zhao, no one else knows that this year's astrology section has a unique question. It's the same question from 20 years ago. Who would purposely take that paper in order to save their lives? As he said this, he carefully looked at Ji Xingxuan's expression. Seeing that she was not in a hurry, he knew what she was thinking. He advised her earnestly, Xian grandfather knows that you are hard-working and does not want to be so eager to win. But among the subjects that you study, the ones that give you the most confidence are physiognomy and astrology. This year's question is tricky. Out of thousands of people, there are no correct answers. Grandfather doesn't want to see your hard work go to waste. Think about it, grandfather will be retiring next year. My position as the Celestial Commissioner of the Right Justice is remembered by many. At that time I have no choice but to give in. If your marriage with the 7th prince succeeds, it will be fine. But if it doesn't, I can only take the risk and steal the question to ensure that you can stand out in the Diyan examination. I want you to become the Celestial Commissioner as soon as possible. While grandfather is still in his position, I want to pull you up a little. Otherwise, if someone suppresses us in the future, our Ji family will not be able to stand out in Enling City. You know, your life has... At the end of his words, Ji Huaishan stopped speaking. His expression was very serious. Ji Xingxuan's eyes flickered. After a while, she softly said, Xian understands. Hearing this compromise, Ji Huaishan breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that she was young and arrogant. She was unwilling to beat around the bush and would suffer sooner or later. Ji Xingxuan lowered her head and thought for a while. She said again, but it is true that the examination paper is missing. Grandfather, is there no one else who knows the solution to that question? Ji Huaishan let out a long sigh and sat behind the table. He said to her, 20 years ago, I was lucky enough to take the examination at the same age as Mr. Yunhua. At that time, the question for the astrology section was personally ordered by the Celestial Commissioner of that year. Thus, he was the only person who marked the paper. As for EZ, there is only one person who appears every few decades. All the examination papers were stored separately. The person who stored them was the chief examiner of that year, Qin Jingming. Now that Qin Jingming has passed away, I dare not say that in this world, other than the Celestial Commissioner of Anling City, the only person who knows the solution to the question is Yunhua Ez's paper. Originally, I wanted to find that paper and let Zhao Luer share the burden with you. When the examination results are different, she can divert people's attention. But now, Ji Huaishan rubbed his throbbing forehead. Seeing this, Ji Xingxuan smiled bitterly and said guiltily, I am slow and didn't get the paper earlier. I wasted your efforts. Ji Huaishan waved his hand and said tiredly, don't blame yourself. It is grandfather's fault. Go and do what you need to do. I will think of another way. Ji Xingxuan advised, you should rest first. Don't tire yourself out. It's okay. Grandfather's body is strong. I can still hold on for a few more years. It is for your sake. Chapter 210. Yu Shu and Feng Zhaomiao stayed at the Dao-bearing tower for the entire morning before leaving at noon. As they were about to reach the main entrance of the library, Yu Shu said to Feng Zhaomiao, Young Master Feng, are you free later? Let's go to the tea house, I have something to ask you. Sure. Feng Zhaomiao readily agreed. On the second floor of the tea house, Yu Shu chose a quiet table and sat down with Feng Zhaomiao. She ordered a pot of biluacun and 3 kinds of fruits before sending the waiter away. She asked Feng Zhaomiao, I'm curious, who sets the questions for the Dian examination every year? I know. Feng Zhaomiao said, only the Master of Dai is qualified to participate in the Dian examination. Before the examination, the Celestial Commissioner and the Junior Supervisor will personally select about 20 of them. They may be from the capital or outside the capital, but they will all be brought to Enling before the 10th month. They are forbidden to leave or visit, and there will be people patrolling until the end of the 6 subjects. Yu Shu asked again, if that's the case, won't the families of the Master of Dai who sets the questions benefit from this? Feng Zhaomiao shook his head. The families of the Master of Dai who sets the questions are strictly forbidden from having their families take the examination. Once they are found out, it is the same as cheating. Yu Shu's eyes flashed. This meant that Ji Xingxuan would be participating in this year's Dian. The Ji family's old Master Ji, who held an important position in the Celestial Commissioner, was definitely not one of the test setters. This was interesting. She thought that Ji Liangshuan's sneaky search for the Baotai year's examination paper was most likely because the Dian examination's questions were leaked. Even if Ji Huaishan was not the test setter, he must have had some connection with it. This 3-star question had reappeared in the Dian examination paper after more than 20 years. Ji Xingxuan knew the question and came to look for the previous year's examination paper. In her opinion, this was superfluous. There were 2 possibilities. First, to prevent others from learning about this question and looking for it in the Daobearing Tower, she wanted to find it and take it away. Secondly, perhaps the Ji family knew the question but did not know how to solve it, so they came to look for the test paper from that year. Regardless of which possibility it was, Yu Shu was sure that the paper written by Senior Yun Mufeng in her hands was indeed the correct answer to the question from that year. Between the 2 possibilities, she was more inclined to the latter. If Yun Mufeng was the Yun Hua Ez from 20 years ago, she made a bold guess. At that time, there was only one question in the astrology course, and it was only Yun Mufeng who was able to solve it. Moreover, the answer to the question about the omen of the 3 stars was not made public. Therefore, even if one knew the year and subject of the question without knowing the answer, one would not be able to answer it. The only thing that did not make sense was that since Ji Xingxuan knew that Yun Mufeng's answer paper was hidden in the Feng Shun period's file, she must know the person who collected the paper. That person must have seen the answers on the paper. If she wanted the correct answer, wouldn't it be faster to ask that person directly? Thinking about it this way, she felt that the first possibility was more likely. Ji Xingxuan already knew the correct answer and deliberately came to the Daobearing Tower to destroy the paper. This time Yu Shu was worried. If Ji Xingxuan did not know the correct answer, the paper in her hands would be of great use. If Ji Xingxuan knew the correct answer, then the paper in her hands was equivalent to waste paper. It was not enough to use it to report the Ji family for cheating, nor was it enough to expose any inside story. Just as Yu Shu was wavering in confusion, Feng Zhaomiao added, however, in order to avoid cheating, sometimes the great teacher will personally participate in setting the question. Yu Shu asked suspiciously, does the great teacher also need to be grounded? Feng Zhaomiao smiled, of course not. What kind of status does the great teacher have? Why would he need to be grounded? As long as the question is set by the great teacher, only he knows the correct answer. The marking of the paper will be done by the great teacher himself, no one else. What about the marked papers? Will they be shown to others? Yu Shu blurted out. The papers that passed the exam are collected by the examiners. Those that did not pass the exam are burned as waste paper. Who do they show it to? Feng Zhaomiao paused and suddenly remembered something. She mysteriously said to Yu Shu, but there is a special case. Yu Shu hurriedly asked, what kind of case? That year Ez was born. Once Ez's paper is chosen, it will not be leaked. The great teacher will send someone to be in charge of collecting it. It is not in the library nor is it in the books. If you want to see Ez's paper with your own eyes, you can only rely on your luck. Yu Shu's mind raced and she casually said, I didn't know that you know so much. Of course. Let me tell you a secret. Feng Zhaomiao lowered his voice and said quietly, 20 years ago my grandfather was in charge of collecting the paper of Ez of Yunhua, who was famous in the capital. Yu Shu was suddenly shocked. Your grandfather? Feng Zhaomiao nodded and then became dejected. It's a pity that he passed away a few years ago. Otherwise I could introduce him to you. Passed away a few years ago? Yu Shu frowned. Her mind was in a mess. She could not help but think carefully. She seemed to have grasped something and thought of something. Her eyes brightened and she suddenly saw the light. The probability had exceeded the limit. She dared to bet that Yun Mufeng was Ez of Yunhua. That 3 stars omen must be this year's Dian exam question, and that Xingxuan must not know the correct answer to this question. After bidding farewell to Feng Zhaomiao, Yu Shu could not help but cast a divination for herself on the way back. The smooth results of the divination gave her some confidence. When she returned home in the afternoon, the first thing she did was to drag Jing Chen into the house. Yu Xiaoxiu had not finished school yet, so she did not have to close the door to avoid eavesdropping. What happened? Jing Chen saw that she was in a hurry and asked. I have a way to get the adversity blocking stone back. Yu Shu said with slight excitement. Oh, have you thought of a way? Jing Chen was a little surprised. Yesterday Yu Shu told him that she knew the whereabouts of the adversity blocking stone. He frowned and did not know how to get it back. Who would have thought that she would have a way so quickly? Yu Shu nodded and raised her eyebrows. If we don't steal or rob, we can make her obediently return the thing. Jing Chen saw that she was quite confident, so he asked, didn't you say yesterday that the other party might not be willing to return it? It's different now. I also have something that person wants very much. Yu Shu's lips curled up into a smirk. Jing Chen, what is it? It's also a rare scallop. Yu Shu said it briefly. She did not tell Jing Chen in detail about how she found out about Yunhua Ez's examination paper. She did not know how to explain to him the dirty things that happened in the officialdom examination. She did not have the fortune to enjoy the leaked questions on the old paper. Ji Xingxuan had a reputation in front of her. As a top student from the Imperial Historian's Library, even if she passed the examination, there would not be many gossips. However, she was a bachelor. She wanted to stand out, so she did not dare to take the risk and get herself into trouble. Now, the biggest use of that old paper for her was to exchange for the yellow frost stone. However, she was a little unhappy that Ji Xingxuan got it so easily. Forget it. She would only be at ease if she returned the yellow frost stone to Jing Chen as soon as possible. Jing Chen understood and said, you want to use something to exchange with him? You can say that. But we will not exchange openly. We will do it secretly. This time we will have to rely on you. Yu Shu pushed Jing Chen to sit at her table. She took out a clean piece of paper for him and went to the other side to grind the ink. She said, can't you write with your left hand? Yes. The wound on Jing Chen's right hand had not healed yet. These days he had been teaching Yu Shu how to write with his left hand. Just now he realized that he could hold a brush with both hands. Then I will say and you write. Yu Shu dipped the brush in the ink and passed it to his left. She thought for a while and opened a book on divination on the table. She pointed at the words on it and said, can you imitate the words on this? Don't use your words. The more unrecognizable, the better. Jing Chen looked at the words on the book and nodded. Cough cough. Yu Shu cleared her throat and explained in a low voice. She saw that Jing Chen's brush was very familiar. There were only a few lines, but they were almost the same as the words on the book. She was surprised and couldn't help but have a flash of inspiration. She rubbed her chin and quickly came up with a bad idea. Ji Xingxuan talked to Ji Huaishan that day. For 2 consecutive nights, she spent the night on the astrology platform. She tried to see through the mystery of the 20 years problem but to no avail. At dusk, she left the library and went to the door to get on a sedan chair. Before she got on the sedan chair, someone ran over from the opposite side of the street and called out to her, are you Miss Ji? Ji Xingxuan turned her head to look at the person. You are? Oh, this lowly one is a waiter from the tea house across the street. I have a letter here. A young master who was drinking tea upstairs asked me to give it to you. As he said this, he handed over a wax envelope. Ji Xingxuan hesitantly took it. She used her fingernails to pry open the wax seal and took out a thin piece of paper. She shook it open and read the contents. Her fingers tightened and her expression suddenly changed. She hurriedly folded the letter twice and put it in her sleeve. She asked the waiter in a low voice, who sent you to deliver this letter? Take me to him. Seeing this, the waiter didn't dare to say anything. He lowered his head and led her back to the tea house. However, he looked up and down the stairs but couldn't find the person who delivered the letter. The waiter pointed to a seat on the 2nd floor by the window. He was here a moment ago. He was sitting there. Ji Xingxuan strode forward. The tea and snacks on the table hadn't been cleaned yet. She reached out to touch the teapot but it was already cold. She stood by the window and looked down. She could see the direction of the library's entrance. She knew that the other party had been waiting for her here for some time. Ji Xingxuan's heart sank. She gripped the window railing tightly. What did that person look like? What did he say to you? Tell me. The more detailed, the better. Ji Xingxuan turned around and took out her money pouch. She placed a piece of silver on the table. The waiter looked at the silver and swallowed his saliva. He gestured with his hands and described, that person was about this tall. He had a mustache above his lips. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. He looked like he was in his early 20s. Oh, that's right. He had a big mole on one side of his face. It was the size of a soybean. Chapter 211. In the evening, Ji Xingxuan hurried back to the Ji mansion. Seeing a carriage parked in front of the door, she knew that there were guests. She called the housekeeper who was working in the front courtyard and asked, "What guest has come?" "Miss, you've returned. It's Scholar Zhao from the Taisha Library. The great master is entertaining him in the warm room." Ji Xingxuan frowned and gave the housekeeper a few instructions. Then she quickly walked in the direction of the rear courtyard. When she arrived in front of the warm room, she first had the servant girl waiting outside go in to report before lifting her skirt and entering the room. There were two people sitting in the tea room. The older one was Ji Huaishan, and the other was a middle-aged man dressed in cinnabar robes. He was one of the scholars of the Taisha Library, Zhao Zhixue. "Uncle Zhao." Zhao Zhixue said amiably, "Ah, Xingxuan, have you just returned from the library? I heard from your grandfather that you've been studying very late these past few days before returning home. Although the Dian examination is near, it's good to work hard, but don't tire yourself out." "Thank you for your concern, uncle. Xingxuan has been rude and disturbed your discussion." Ji Xingxuan first apologized. Then she turned to Ji Huaishan, who was brewing tea with a silver silk bamboo, and said, "Grandfather, I have a friend who wants to borrow our family's Big Dipper ruler. Can you accompany me to get it?" Seeing her slightly anxious expression, Ji Huaishan's eyebrows trembled. He turned to Zhao Zhixue and said helplessly, "This child has been spoiled by me. She always casually borrows valuable items. I'll go with her to get it. You sit and drink your tea. We'll continue our discussion later." Zhao Zhixue smiled and said, "Old Ji should be content. If our lure was as sensible as Xingxuan, I would be laughing even in my dreams. You can go, I'll wait. I'm not an outsider." Ji Huaishan stood up and walked out with Ji Xingxuan. The two of them left the warm pavilion and went outside. Not too far from the courtyard, Ji Huaishan waved his servants away and stopped to ask Ji Xingxuan, "What happened? Why are you so flustered?" Although there was no one around, Ji Xingxuan still lowered her voice and said, "Someone seems to have found out about the theft." Ji Huaishan's expression suddenly changed and he said in a deep voice, "What's going on? Tell me in detail." Ji Xingxuan then hastily recounted how she received the anonymous letter at the entrance of the library after school. She then took out the letter from her bosom and handed it to Ji Huaishan with both hands. "Look, the person in the letter says that she found an old item from 20 years ago. Isn't it referring to Yunhua Ez's examination paper?" Ji Huaishan brought the letter to the light of the lantern and read it carefully. On it was written, "Miss Ji, this lowly one has come across an old item from 20 years ago. I know that Miss is in great need of it and wishes to fulfill your wish. Don't worry, Miss, this lowly one has no other intentions but to ask for an item from Mississippi. If you are interested, we will meet at noon the next day on Qinyuan Street in front of the Eternal Spring Square. One item for one item, the best of both worlds. If we do not meet at that time, I will assume that you have no intention of exchanging." When Ji Huaishan saw this letter, his complexion was not much better than Ji Xingxuan's. This clearly showed that the theft had been leaked. Although he believed that his hands and feet were clean and did not leave behind any evidence of the theft, the sudden arrival of such a letter inevitably made him feel as if there was a blade on his back. He was frightened. "This person said that he wants me to give him an item in exchange. He did not specify what it was, nor did he specifically say anything. After thinking about it, I'm afraid that what he wants is this calamity-blocking stone." Ji Xingxuan hesitantly rolled up her sleeve, revealing the yellow stone bead on her wrist that was threaded with a red string. Ji Huaishan furrowed his brows and asked suspiciously, "Even I, your grandfather, do not recognize this bead. If not for the junior supervisor who came to visit the estate and saw it by chance, giving you a few pointers and explaining its use, you might not have known that it was a treasure. Didn't I tell you to keep it well and not show it to others? Did you mention it to anyone and let it slip?" "I have never mentioned it to anyone else. I don't know how this person found out." Ji Xingxuan shook her head. She held her wrist and thought, "But since he could see it, he must be someone I know. Do you still remember that day when I went with Lu to the library to look for the exam papers? At that time, I sensed that someone was one step ahead of us. Maybe that person really has Yunhua Ez's exam papers. Grandfather, what do you think we should do?" The grandfather and granddaughter were silent for a moment. Ji Huaishan first said cautiously, "Regardless of where this person came from, tomorrow you will go as promised. I will send a few more guards to secretly follow you and investigate this person's identity. If he really has that exam paper in his hands..." He paused and his eyes became fierce. "You must get it." Ji Xingxuan lowered her head and fiddled with the small bead on her wrist. She said, I am worried that this person might also be an examinee of the Grand Yen examination. Since he knows the questions, how could he not answer them during the exam? If that person also leaked the questions to someone else, even if I know the answers with Lu or Mimi's help, we might not only get 3 grades for that subject. We might even get 4 or 5 grades. What's the point of that? To this statement, Ji Huaishan disagreed. He stroked his beard and said, You worry too much. This is the Grand Yen examination. Who would easily leak the answers to someone else? Even if he is that magnanimous, he has to think about whether it will bring trouble upon himself. This person must have a brain to write to you anonymously. Although he is greedy, he knows the principle of making the best use of everything. He definitely wouldn't do such a foolish thing. You can go tomorrow with peace of mind. Grandfather will definitely not let you lose this rock of disaster. Ji Xingxuan still wanted to say something, but Ji Huaishan waved his hand and interrupted her. He handed the letter back to her. Take it and burn it. I still have something to discuss with your Uncle Zhao. You go back to your room and rest. I will arrange the details tomorrow morning. Ji Xingxuan clutched the letter and watched the old man leave. She raised her head to look at the stars in the sky and frowned. She had a vague premonition that things wouldn't go so smoothly. There were only a few days left in November. Seeing that the Grand Yen examination was just around the corner, Yu Shu had been reading Yi Li's essays day and night, as if she was preparing for the exam. Tonight, however, she turned off the lights early and went to bed. This made Yu Xiaoxiu, who had finally gotten used to sleeping with the lights on, feel very strange. In the dark, separated by a screen, he asked Yu Shu on the other side of the bed, Sister, are you going to study tonight? Oh, I have to go out tomorrow. Rest early. Yu Shu yawned and turned over. Her hand touched the side of the pillow and grabbed a ball of fluffy kimbao. She casually pushed this little thing, which had a nest but didn't sleep in, to the head of the bed. She didn't want it to squeak and wake up if she accidentally rolled over in the middle of the night. She had business to attend to the next day, so she had to get enough sleep tonight. Sister, why didn't Brother Shui come to our house to play these days? Yu Xiaoxiu asked as he rested his head on his arm. Shui Rui had visited their house frequently a while ago, so he intentionally corrected Yu Xiaoxiu's words. As a result, Yu Xiaoxiu no longer addressed him as Big Brother Chao. Busy yourself. Your brother Shui is an official. He has to go to the yamen to work every day. How can he have so much free time? Yu Shu closed her eyes and felt a little sleepy. Yu Xiaoxiu was silent for a while and then said, When he came back last time, he said that he would take me to ride a horse next time when we rest in the study. I don't know if he has forgotten. Hearing the expectation in the child's words, Yu Shu opened one eyelid. Why do you want to ride a horse? I thought you didn't like to do it? The other side of the screen said shyly, No. It's just that among my classmates, I'm the worst at riding. I'm always laughed at. Seeing that he was willing to confess, Yu Shu was not afraid of hurting his self-esteem. She chuckled a few times and then comforted him. Well, next time I see him, I will help you ask him. Your brother Shui is a man of his words. Don't worry, go to sleep. Yu Xiaoxiu grinned and rubbed his head on the pillow. Not long after, he fell asleep. Yu Shu, on the other hand, was no longer sleepy because of his words. She thought that she should learn how to ride a horse. It was much more convenient than sitting in a sedan chair or carriage. However, it seemed that a bad horse cost hundreds of taels of silver. The daily grass was more expensive than the food people ate. She couldn't afford it now, and there was no extra space in the yard to keep a horse. Otherwise she could buy one first. Imagining the heroic scene of riding a horse one day, Yu Shu gradually fell asleep. The next morning, as soon as Yu Xiaoxiu went out, Yu Shu first changed the medicine on Jing Chen's hand, and then went into the room to busy herself. Yesterday, she sent a letter to Ji Xingxuan to make a deal at noon on Qinyuan Street. Although she didn't really plan to show her face, she was very unlucky. In case she met Ji Xingxuan and was recognized, she decided to disguise herself. Of course, she didn't have the ability to disguise herself, but Yu Shu still had a way to dress up so that no one could recognize her. She fished out an old dress from the cabinet, cut a few holes, tore the hem of the dress and put it on over the cotton jacket. She untied her hair, combed it into a crooked bun, and tied it with a piece of cloth that she tore off from her clothes. She looked at herself in the mirror. Except for her pale face and delicate facial features, she looked like a beggar begging on the street. After turning around with satisfaction, Yu Shu swaggered out. Jing Chen was sitting in the main room waiting for her. Just now, he heard her tossing and turning in the room, and when he saw her sloppy behavior, something suddenly flashed through his mind. He was startled and his face showed a bit of confusion. How did you get yourself into this? In case someone recognized me, Yushu answered vaguely. She went into the kitchen, scraped a layer of soot and patted it on her face. She washed her hands and then walked into the main room with her hands on her hips. She smiled at Jing Chen, showing her white teeth, and said proudly, "How is it? Can you still recognize me when I'm dressed like this?" Jing Chen said honestly, "I can recognize you no matter what you're dressed like." Seeing that he didn't give her face, Yushu didn't feel angry. Instead, she was a bit happy. She snorted and went back to the room to get the bamboo hat that she bought yesterday. She walked in front of Jing Chen, put it on his head and tied a knot under his white chin. Her eyes stayed on his face for a moment, and then she raised her hand to pull down the white gauze on the brim of the hat, covering his handsome face. She took 2 steps back, looked at him carefully and shook her head with a smile. She wanted to dress him up as a beggar, but she couldn't help it. He was a natural beauty, and even if he wore ragged clothes, he didn't look like a lowly person. "Okay, let's go." Yushu hung the key around her neck and unlocked the door. "You still haven't told me where we're going today." Jing Chen gently twisted the overly tight rope on his chin, got up and walked toward her. Chapter 212. At noon on the 28th of November, Ji Xingxuan arrived at Changchun Square as promised and stopped by the street. She got off the sedan chair and looked around the street. She didn't find anyone suspicious, so she led her maidservant through the busy street to the market on the opposite side of the street. The anonymous letter she received only asked her to keep the appointment at Eternal Spring Square at noon today. Firstly, it didn't ask her to go alone, and secondly, it didn't explain how the transaction would be carried out. She couldn't even confirm what the other party wanted. But Ji Xingxuan wasn't worried. Ji Huaishan had arranged for 5 or 6 guards to disguise themselves as passers-by in the vicinity. Even her maidservant knew some martial arts. As long as the person showed up, they wouldn't let him go no matter what. Ji Xingxuan deliberately arrived a moment earlier, but it wasn't noon yet. After waiting for a long time, no one came. It wasn't fun to stand on the street in winter, and the cold wind made her face hurt. Fortunately, she was dressed warmly. A light red fur cloak wrapped around her slim figure, and a green veil covered her face, revealing only her white forehead and eyes. Even if it was only half covered, it was enough to make passers-by turn back and stare. The winter sun was half hidden in the clouds. Hearing the ringing of the bell tower in the distance, Ji Xingxuan became alert and looked at the passers-by in front of her. Suddenly she felt something was thrown behind her. The maidservant beside her made a sound and bent down to pick up a crumpled paper ball. Mississippi, Ji Xingxuan took the paper ball and quickly looked behind her, but she could only see a short figure sneaking into the crowd and disappearing in the blink of an eye. She didn't ask the maidservant to chase after him, but opened the paper ball and unfolded it. On it was written, "Go south, there is a blind old beggar. Put the red string in your hand into the broken alms bowl in front of him. Take 5 steps back and wait for a while and you will get what you want." Ji Xingxuan thought. Sure enough, the anonymous person with EZ's test paper didn't want to meet her face to face, fearing that she would see through his identity. Now she was very curious. Since the other party didn't show up, how did he plan to take away the calamity-blocking stone in her hand, and how was he going to exchange the test paper with her? Could it be that from the very beginning, that person had the intention to gain something without risking anything? She furrowed her brows and carefully put the ball of paper into her sleeve. She whispered a few words to the maidservant and told her to inform the guards in the dark to pay attention to the beggar. After a while, when the maidservant came back, Ji Xingxuan walked into the street south of the road. With one step, she went from the north to the south of the city. The people of Anling said that there was a street called Qianyuan Street. It was divided into the north and south by only one street, but there were 2 different scenes. The north side was neat and tidy, while the south side was bustling with people. Changchun Square was originally a vegetable market. Early in the morning, farmers would enter the city to sell their wares. There were only a few types of winter vegetables such as green and white, spinach and radish. They were all placed on the ground. Many people who lived in the north of the city would come here to buy, so this street was always bustling during the day. There were more and more people on the street. Ji Xingxuan had her maidservant walk in front of her to clear the way so that she wouldn't run into other people, but the crowd still made her feel a little uncomfortable. Behind her, a few guards followed. She looked carefully on both sides of the road. After walking for about 100 steps, she saw the blind beggar mentioned in the letter at the foot of the wall of a bun shop. This old man had white hair and a haggard expression. He was curled up at the foot of the wall, his clothes were tattered and his eyes were covered with a dirty black cloth. There was no doubt that he was blind. In front of him, there was a broken pottery bowl with only 3 to 5 copper coins. Last year there was a drought in the north and many beggars fled to Anling City. Because there was no lack of women coming and going to buy vegetables and meat in Changchun Square, many people felt pity for them, so there were more beggars here than other places. In the alley behind this old beggar, there were 4 to 5 beggars squatting there. There were big and small beggars, all dressed in thin clothes, their heads hunched against the cold. Ji Xingxuan stopped in front of this blind old beggar. Her eyes showed some pity. She untied her pouch, bent down and put a piece of silver into the bowl in front of him. She then fumbled in her pouch and took out the disaster-blocking stone that she specially took out before she left this morning. She squeezed it in her palm and after a short moment of hesitation she also put it into the bowl. Seeing this scene, the eyes of the beggars near the foot of the wall brightened at the same time. They raised their heads and looked at the old beggar's broken bowl. Some were greedy, and some were sneering. Ji Xingxuan put away the bead and stood up. Her eyes didn't leave the beggar's broken bowl. She retreated step by step and stopped after 5 steps. Every time a pedestrian passed by her, they would be vigilant. Several guards quietly spread out and stood around Ji Xingxuan so that they could catch the person later. Ji Xingxuan knew that there were people following them, so she was very relieved. If the other party had the ability to take away the thing under the eyes of so many people without showing themselves, then he would be a ghost. At this moment, the sky suddenly turned gloomy. Boom! There was a thunderous sound and the whole street was filled with screams. Ji Xingxuan was also startled by the sound of thunder. She was distracted for a moment, and the sky started to rain heavily. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. Crack! Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that at this moment, a few beggars who had been squatting at the entrance of the alley all rushed towards the old beggar who was at the foot of the wall. They scrambled to stretch out their hands, and their target was the broken bowl at his feet. The first beggar, who was short, nimbly grabbed the broken bowl in his arms and was about to run into the crowd in front of him. Not good. This sudden situation made Ji Xingxuan's expression change. She didn't need to shout, and several guards in the crowd had already moved. One by one they pushed through the crowd and chased after the beggar. However, the rain suddenly fell, and the street was full of pedestrians running around to hide from the rain. They pushed and shoved, which became an invisible obstacle, making it difficult for several men to chase after a child. Stop! Don't run! The beggar ran with his head down and accidentally bumped into someone. He almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Fang Zhong reached out and pulled him. The beggar used the force to stand firm, and his hand left a black handprint on the other's white sleeve. He didn't notice that the sleeve flew past the alms bowl in his hand. When he heard the sound of people chasing behind him, he ran away again. Standing on the noisy street in the heavy rain, Ji Xingxuan's eyelids twitched. She was afraid that she would lose the stone, so she pulled her maidservant and ran towards the south. The rain became heavier in the blink of an eye. She didn't run far before she was separated from her maid. The fluff on the collar of her cloak was soaked and stuck pitifully to her slender neck. She shivered and was hit by a passerby who was trying to hide from the rain. She slipped and fell on the road. Hiss! The stinging pain from her knees and palms made her face pale. She tried to stand up, but she found that she had twisted her leg. The heavy rain poured down and the rainwater flowed down her forehead. The veil stuck to her face and a few strands of her hair fell into a mess. Passers-by pointed at her, so she turned her face away in embarrassment. She lowered her wet eyelashes and was no longer in such a sorry state. However, at this moment the cold wind suddenly stopped and the heavy rain stopped. She raised the back of her hand to wipe the rainwater from her eyes. She saw a pair of wet black boots and white trousers. When she looked up, she saw a hand holding an umbrella and a blurry face under a bamboo hat. Here you go. Ji Xingxuan was in a daze. She subconsciously reached out to take the umbrella handle. At the same time, the other person let go of the umbrella handle and straightened up. He turned around and walked past her. The black robe lightly brushed past her shoulder. She quickly turned her head to look, but the white figure had already disappeared into the crowd. Miss? The anxious shout made her come back to her senses. She responded and the maidservant squeezed through the crowd and hurriedly helped her stand up. Miss, are you hurt anywhere? Ji Xingxuan grabbed the maidservant's hand and asked, Where is he? Did you catch him? They've all gone to chase after him. They definitely won't let him escape. Don't worry. Go back to the sedan first. The maidservant tried to persuade her. Although Ji Xingxuan was anxious, she was afraid of losing the topaz. However, she also knew that she couldn't help much here, so she nodded and passed the oil paper umbrella to the maidservant. Everything was fine when we left the house. Why did it suddenly start raining? Miss, where did you get the umbrella? Just now. Ji Xingxuan answered as she raised her head. Her voice paused because she saw a small bamboo tube tied with a red string in the middle of the umbrella stand. She took it down suspiciously and fiddled with it in her hands. Soon she realized that the bamboo tube was as thick as 2 fingers and could be unscrewed. After pulling off the top, the contents inside were revealed. Her expression tightened and she took it out to take a look. It was an old and yellowish paper. She suddenly stopped in her tracks. This is Yunhua Yi's examination paper. Miss? Ji Xingxuan took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she rolled up the test paper again. She tried it a few times before stuffing it back into the bamboo tube. She should have been happy that the other party had kept their promise, but the image of the white figure holding the umbrella flashed through her mind. She became somewhat resentful and tightened her grip on the small bamboo tube with the red string tied to it. It was still raining. Yu Shu, who was unkempt and dirty, squatted under the eaves at the entrance of the alley to hide from the rain. She saw Jing Chen's figure appear on the street and smiled. She took out a string of copper coins from her bosom and covered it with her sleeves. She turned her head and grabbed the old beggar's hand and put it on the coins. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Master, keep it well. If you're hungry, take some to buy steamed buns. Don't let anyone see you." You are? I'm the one who thanks you. After saying that, she left the blind old beggar, who had a surprised look on his face as he fumbled with the string of copper coins. She waved at Jing Chen and pointed at the alley behind her, gesturing for him to follow her. The two of them entered the empty alley one after another. Yu Shu looked around before stopping. She moved closer to Jing Chen and widened her eyes that were filled with anticipation. She asked excitedly, "How is it? Did you get it?" It was still raining. Jing Chen pulled off the string of his hat with one hand and took off his bamboo hat. He put it on top of her head to block the raindrops that fell on her head from the eaves. Then he reached his left hand into his bosom and took something out. He handed it to her and opened it. Yu Shu looked at his empty palm and opened her mouth wide. She was dumbfounded. However, with a light chuckle, he flipped his hand and a bright yellow bead appeared in the center of his palm. Chapter 213. Outside the window it was still raining. In the study, Ji Hyotani was holding the paper that Ji Xingxuan brought back. Next to his hand was a yellowish notebook. He compared the handwriting on the paper and dipped a bit of Matsutake tea into the corner of the paper to check the age of the paper. After a long while, a happy expression appeared on his face. It's true. The handwriting on this paper is exactly the same as the notebook left by Yunhua Yi in the Celestial Commissioner's treasury. Also, this paper is indeed 20 years old. That's why it turned green after being stained with Matsutake mushroom. Xingxuan, you've done a good job. When Ji Xingxuan heard this good news, she was not as happy as Ji Hyotani. She turned her head to look outside the window and smiled bitterly, "But I've lost the rock and the person has not been caught." Ji Hyotani had heard about the exchange between Ji Xingxuan and the anonymous person at Eternal Spring Square from her maid. He thought that she must be upset after losing her most beloved item. He comforted her, "Don't worry. Grandfather has already sent people around Eternal Spring Square to investigate the person's appearance. Once we find the whereabouts of the thief, we will definitely get the item back for you." Ji Xingxuan turned around to look at Ji Hyotani and said, "To catch that person, I'm afraid it won't be easy. On my way back I've thought about it. Today's incident is too much of a coincidence. How could there be a heavy rain at noon? I've also questioned the few beggars. They all said that no one ordered them to do so, so how could they coincidentally start a disturbance at that time? When the guards caught the little beggar who tried to steal the money, they didn't let him out of their sight on the way back. However, they didn't see the rock. This is abnormal. I've thought about it, the anonymous person must have planned all of this beforehand. In such a short period of time he was able to take advantage of the right time, the right place and the right people. This kind of person is not only astute, he must also be very skilled in disguise." Ji Hyotani frowned. "The person who gave you the umbrella must be this anonymous writer. Are you sure you didn't see his face clearly?" Ji Xingxuan's eyes flickered. Sighing softly, she hung her head and said, "It was raining heavily at that time and I fell down. I only saw a silhouette but did not see what kind of clothes the person was wearing. Whether it was a man or a woman I do not know." Not knowing that she was hiding something, Ji Hyotani nodded, knowing that the chances of finding the calamity-blocking stone was next to zero. Seeing that she was struggling over this, his expression turned serious, saying, "Whether you can find it or not, don't think too much about it for now. Later go get your protective jade and put it back on. There are still 3 days until the Big Yen examination. You should focus on preparing for it. Now that you have Yunhua Ez's paper in your hands, you should think about how to solve the questions. You can't just copy his answers. What do you think of the phrase, 'A son will be born in this year'? Great fortune will bring disaster. What do you think? Let me hear it." Hearing this, Ji Xingxuan suppressed the irritation in her heart and held her empty wrist. I think that, combined with the sign of the 3 stars, this sentence is a metaphor. After this sign appears, there will be a person who will be born with great wealth during the next spring festival. But his life will bring disaster to the heavens. She had an indescribable premonition that sooner or later, she would meet the person who gave her the umbrella in the rain again. Braving the heavy rain and returning home, Yushu was shivering from the cold. She scooped up half a basin of warm water from the stove and brought it back to her bedroom. She quickly washed her hands and face, took off her wet clothes and threw them to the side. Naked, she crawled into bed. Jingchen was also quite wet. But now that his martial arts had recovered, he was not afraid of the cold. After changing out of his wet clothes, he went to the kitchen and added firewood to boil water with one hand. It took a long time for Yushu to warm herself up. She pricked up her ears and listened to the movements outside the house. She wrapped herself in the quilt and shouted, "Jingchen, be careful not to get your hands wet." Jingchen, who was preparing to make tea in the kitchen, stopped what he was doing. He raised his right hand to look at the traces of wetness on the gauze. He turned to see that the fire on the stove was still burning. He bent down and put his hand on it. When the moisture on it evaporated, he continued to pour tea. He carried the brewed hot tea into the big house and knocked on Yushu's door. "Xiao." "Oh wait." Yushu reached for the chest top and panties at the head of the bed. She put them on under the quilt and then put on a pair of pants. She was reluctant to leave the quilt that she had just warmed up, so she wrapped herself in the quilt. Only her head was exposed and she stepped out of the bed in her shoes to open the door. Jingchen walked in with a cup of tea in one hand. Seeing that she was wrapped in the quilt and stomping her feet, he said to her, "Go sit on the bed." Yushu embarrassedly laughed twice, then jogged back to the bed, kicked off her shoes, and put her feet back under the quilt. She watched as Jingchen put the tea on the desk, poured a cup, and handed it to her. Yushu stretched out her hands from under the thick quilt and carefully took the cup. The slightly hot cup made her sigh in comfort. She lowered her head and blew on it, then she couldn't help but take small sips. Jingchen patiently stood by the bed, waiting for her to slowly finish drinking the water, then he took the empty cup and put it back on the table. He turned around, pinched the cold bead from his sleeve and handed it to her. Yushu took it with a smile and carefully looked at it in the light of the window. She held it in her palm and rubbed it for a while. Her palm quickly heated up, but the bead was still cold. "It's true. This is the yellow frost stone you gave me." The joy of regaining something she had lost made her smile from ear to ear, even if this treasure didn't belong to her. Yushu pinched the yellow frost stone and handed it back to Jingchen. She was thinking about how to ask him to let her wear the death-blocking stone for a while to get rid of bad luck. When she studied the cycle of his Kata star, she would return it to him. However, before she said anything, Jingchen said first, "You keep it." Yushu was stunned and didn't know what to say. She hesitated for a while, then slowly said, "This is the treasure of your sect. I lost it because I was careless. It was not easy to find it and you are giving it to me again. Didn't you dream that your master said this death-blocking stone can't be given to others easily?" Jingchen looked at the yellow stone in Yushu's hand, and there was no reluctance on his face. He moved his gaze to Yushu's face that was slightly red from the hot tea and said, "You said that you can't give it to someone with bad intentions. However, I am your best friend and close like a brother, so naturally I can give it to you. Why can't I?" When Yushu heard the words best friend, she was still able to grin happily. But when she jumped to the words as close as brothers, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She secretly muttered to herself, wondering when this idiot would find out that she was a real woman. She snorted twice and retracted her hand into the blanket, saying, "Then I'll keep it for you for now. When you want it later, I'll return it to you." Jingchen didn't say much and nodded in agreement. His gaze turned and saw her small neck exposed from the quilt. His gaze landed on a mud spot on her slender collarbone. He paused for a moment, then stretched out his hand, pressed his thumb on it and gently rubbed it. Yushu didn't pay attention and was scratched by him on her neck. The itch made her shrink her shoulders. When she realized how frivolous his action was, she stretched out her hand from the quilt, grabbed his wrist with one hand and covered her neck with the other. She raised her head and stared at him. "What are you doing?" She didn't expect that when she moved, the quilt on her body directly fell from her shoulders. She only wore a small shirt that wrapped around her chest, and most of her shoulders were exposed to the air. Her smooth shoulders were different from a man's rough shoulders. Under the small green shirt, the curve of her chest was not very obvious, but it was indeed flatter than a man's. Jing Qin stood at the side of the bed, looking down from above. Everything was clear at a glance. No one expected this scene and both of them were stunned at the same time. It wasn't until Yushu sneezed from the cold that she let go of his wrist with a stiff expression. She pulled the quilt up to her waist and covered herself tightly. She didn't even look at Jing Chen's expression at the moment. She pressed her forehead with one hand and said in a muffled voice, "Go out and close the door." This sound broke the silence. In Jing Chen's mind, the scene he just saw appeared clearly, and some details of his daily life flashed through his mind. His eyes blinked slightly and he suddenly realized something. He suddenly turned around and walked out of Yushu's room with one hand. As soon as the door was closed, Yushu couldn't keep her face. She tilted her body to the head of the bed and held the small stone in her hand. She hit the pillow and squeezed out a frustrated moan from her throat. Outside the door, Jing Qin stood there for a while. He slowly raised his hand, clenched it into a fist and pressed it between his eyebrows. Behind his wet temples, there was a red tip of his ears. Yushu and Jing Qin stayed in their respective rooms until dusk. The rain stopped and Yu Xiaoxiu came back from school. "Open the door, I'm back." Yu Xiaoxiu knocked on the door several times before he saw Jing Qin opening it. He didn't notice his unnatural expression, so he smiled at him and closed the door. Then he ran into the room with his school bag and said excitedly, Brother, let me tell you today, Brother Shui." He pushed the door of the bedroom with his hand and wanted to go in, but found that the door was locked from the inside. Yushu had already dressed up and was sitting at the desk to recite a book. She didn't read much in the afternoon. When she heard Yu Xiaoxiu knocking on the door, she didn't move. She didn't want to open the door for him. She turned a page of the book and answered lazily, "Brother Shui, what's wrong?" Yu Xiaoxiu thought that she was changing clothes inside and it was not convenient for him to go in, so he stood at the door with his school bag in his arms and said, "Brother Shui went to the study garden to find me today. He asked me when I don't have to go to school. He said he would take me to ride horses outside the city, but he asked me to come back and ask you. You have to agree." Because Yu Xiaoxiu had mentioned this to Yushu before, she just said, "Oh," and said absent-mindedly, "If you want to go, then go." Hearing her promise, Yu Xiaoxiu scratched his head and continued, "Brother Shui also asked me to tell you that he is busy with the yamen these days, so it's not convenient for him to come to the south of the city to find you. He said that when you go to take the exam in the first day of the new year, he will send a carriage to pick you up in the morning. He wants you to prepare for the exam." Hearing this, Yushu's face became expressionless again. She put the book upside down on the table and held her chin helplessly. Although she was grateful for Shui Rui's willingness to help others, she couldn't help feeling bitter. "It seems that I have to find a chance to make it clear to him. It's not good to keep doing this." Chapter 214. The weather was cold, so Yushu was too lazy to make dinner. In the evening when Yu Xiaoxiu came back, she changed her boots, put on a cotton coat and wrapped herself up tightly. She planned to buy some cooked food on the street to eat. There was a yellow paper lantern hanging under the eaves of the small courtyard. Jing Qin swept the rainwater in the courtyard and put down the broom against the wall. When he turned around and saw Yushu coming out of the house, he turned around and picked up the broom again. He continued to sweep along the clean corner of the wall. Yushu saw his small actions and almost laughed out loud. She lightly coughed, threw a piece of silver in her hand, and walked past him as if she didn't see him. When she reached the door, she opened the door and stepped out. Then she heard Jing Chen's question, "It's dark, where are you going?" She hid the smile on her face and turned her head. Her expression was the same as usual, as if nothing had happened during the day. "I'm going to Lu Er's shop to buy some meat to roast. I'll come back later to make some egg drop soup for dinner." Jing Chen looked up at the dark sky and held the broom in his hand. He seemed to hesitate for a moment before saying, "I'll go with you." Yushu looked at Jing Chen openly, but he didn't dare to look at her. She couldn't help but want to play with him, so she nodded to him. "Then let's go." As he spoke, he called out to Yu Xiaoxiu, who was still in the room, and told him to watch the door. Then he walked out the door with his sleeves in his hands. After walking a distance, he realized that Jing Chen wasn't following him. He turned his head and saw that Jing Chen was 7 or 8 steps behind him, so he stopped and waited for him. He urged, "Hurry up, I'm hungry." Jing Chen had to quickly walk to her side, but there was a large distance between them. From afar, the two of them looked like they didn't know each other. The alley was dark, so Yushu couldn't see his expression when she turned her head, so she deliberately leaned towards him. She moved a step to the right and Jing Chen moved a step to the wall. As he walked, he almost stuck to the wall. Yushu finally couldn't hold back her laughter. She grabbed his sleeve and pulled him towards her. She sneered, "Why are you hiding? Do you think I can eat you? If I take a detour, I'll hit the wall." If the sky was a little brighter, one would be able to see the slight embarrassment on Jing Chen's face. He couldn't break free from Yushu, so he let her pull his sleeve forward and didn't move to the side. Jing Chen had a pure mind, and he had lived in seclusion in the mountains all year round. He had little contact with the common people. Whether it was before or after he lost his memory, he was vague about the specific differences between men and women. However, people had a trace of instinct. When he saw the scene in Yushu's room during the day, he clearly felt that Yushu and he were different. Previously, Yu Xiaoxiu had instilled in him a lot of different concepts between men and women. He had also read some books about human relations. Therefore, when he thought that the person he spent all day and night with, who was like a brother to him, was most likely a girl, he felt at a loss. Therefore, he should have been in a position to question Yushu about the fact that she had been hiding things from him all this time. Now all he could think about was how to treat her. When the two of them walked to the entrance of the alley, Jing Chen finally mustered up the courage to ask, "Xiaoyu, there's a fried sugar cake stall." It was unclear whether Yushu had intentionally or not interrupted Jing Chen's words. She dragged him and ran across the street excitedly. Jing Chen had no choice but to swallow his words. He was dragged by her to the food stall that was emitting smoke and smoke. As soon as there was a pot of fried sugar cake in front of them, Yushu stuck her head out to look around. Soon she had bought 6 sugar cakes in one go. She wrapped them in a few layers of oiled paper and held them in her arms. Because they were too hot, she did not dare to eat them directly. Therefore, she could only smell the aroma of the cakes to satisfy her craving. She did not eat much for lunch, so it was rare that she was hungry. Jing Chen saw that she was focused on the sugar cake, so he did not say anything else. He quietly walked beside her. The two of them bought 2 meat dishes and 1 vegetable dish from Lu Er's food stall on Huixing Street. They also picked up a few tea eggs which Jing Chen carried. When Yushu's sugar cake was about to enter her mouth, she weighed one in the oiled paper and took 2 bites. As the sugar juice slipped into her mouth, she sucked in air and finished it quickly. Then, she pinched another one and handed it to Jing Chen. "Here, you haven't eaten much during the day. Eat it first." Jing Chen's hands were full of food, so he could not take it, so he shook his head. "You eat it?" Yushu looked at him and rolled her eyes. She raised the sweet cake high and brought it to his mouth. She giggled and said, "Come, have a bite." When Jing Chen was injured, Yushu had personally fed him many times. So he was used to her actions. When he saw her bring the cake to his mouth, he subconsciously opened his mouth. When he tasted the sweetness in his mouth, he suddenly realized that it was inappropriate. So he bit the cake in his mouth. He did not know whether to swallow or spit it out, so he could only puff up his cheeks. Yushu looked at him. She was laughing in her heart, but she pretended that nothing had happened. She asked him, "How is it? Is it delicious?" Jing Chen had something in his mouth, so he could not speak. This child was also very honest, so he did not know how to respond with an N. Yushu teased him even more. She put the oiled cake to his mouth again. "Is it not delicious?" "I think it's delicious. Have another bite." Jing Chen had a difficult expression on his face. He had no choice but to stiffen his neck and swallow the mouthful in his mouth. Because he swallowed too quickly, he accidentally choked and coughed violently. Cough, cough. When Yushu saw this, she immediately stopped teasing him and quickly patted his back. "Cough, no cough, cough, it's okay." Jing Chen calmed down and waved his hand at Yushu. Yushu looked at his flushed face and rubbed her nose guiltily. She no longer had the mood to tease him. When she saw that they were about to reach the entrance of the alley, she slowed down and slowly said, "I lied to you. It's my fault." Jing Chen did not react for a moment. He asked in confusion, "Lied to me about what?" If these words came from someone else's mouth, Yushu would think that he was asking the obvious. But this person was Jing Chen. She knew that he was not a cunning person. After a few steps of silence, she stopped at the entrance of the alley. She turned around and faced Jing Chen. Although she felt embarrassed, she still looked straight into his eyes. "It's just that I'm actually a girl." She still wanted to take the initiative to say these words. She did not wait for Jing Chen to confirm it with her. When Jing Chen heard her admit it herself, he was even more certain that she was a girl. The scenes of their interactions flashed through his mind. The two of them were as close as brothers. His chest suddenly felt heavy, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. Yushu had never seen Jing Chen lose his temper, but she did not think that he would not be angry. She looked at his face with the light of the lantern in front of the shop across the street. She carefully asked, "Jing Chen, are you angry?" "No." Jing Chen shook his head. Although he was feeling complicated, he would not be angry with her. "Really?" Yushu asked suspiciously. She was actually worried that Jing Chen would be dissatisfied with her lie if he found out that she was a girl. That would ruin their relationship. That was why she stayed in the house for the whole afternoon. Yushu could see Jing Chen's expression clearly, but Jing Chen could see her expression even more clearly. He could tell that there was some uneasiness on her face and knew that she was feeling uneasy. The suffocating feeling in his chest instantly dissipated. He thought for a moment and said seriously, "In this world, who hasn't lied to others before? It's just a matter of how much you lie or how little you lie, whether you lie to a bad person or a good person. It's not wrong to lie to others, but it depends on what you're lying to. Although you lied to me, you didn't do anything to harm me, nor did you harbor any ill intentions. Why should I be angry?" He knew that Xiaoyu liked to lie. Perhaps she had lied to him about more than one thing. However, he also knew that she did not mean him any harm. "Why does this sound so familiar?" Yushu muttered. "You said it before," Jing Chen said. Yushu suddenly remembered that she had said these words to him before. Seeing that Jing Chen remembered it so clearly, she grinned and hugged the remaining half a bag of fried sweet cakes. Her chest felt warm and her heart felt as if a large stone had been dropped. She patted his arm and said with a smile, "Jing Chen, I like your magnanimity. If you were an official, you would definitely be a prime minister. It wouldn't be a problem for your stomach to support 7 or 8 boats." Ah. She originally thought that she would have to waste her breath to explain to him. She did not expect that she would be comforted by him instead. This was really funny. Was it because she had the yellow frost stone that her luck changed so quickly? Although Jing Chen was still a little confused and could not adapt to Yushu suddenly becoming a girl, he also smiled when he saw her happy expression. The awkward atmosphere between the two of them dissipated in an instant. The two of them were cloudy and sunny, but the intimate scene between the two of them did not look so good in the eyes of Shui Rui, who was not far away. Shui Rui was really busy these past few days. First, the case with Tai Heng Merchant Association was settled, and he took the opportunity to discuss a business deal with the owner of the Merchant Association. Then, the Supreme Court took over 2 cases and he had to personally look over them. Lastly, the decorations of his restaurant were almost done, and he was going to open the next day. He had no time to spare, so he couldn't care about Yushu. He passed by Baichuan Academy in the afternoon and went in to see Yu Xiaoxiu. He suddenly received an official document in the afternoon saying that he had to go to Luz for a few days. Coincidentally, he had missed Yushu's first exam. Thus, he rejected a banquet in the evening and took a horse carriage to the south of the city to see her. He wanted to see her and give her some instructions. Who would have thought that the moment he arrived, he would see her talking and laughing with someone on the streets? She was a completely heartless girl. Shui Rui raised his eyebrows. He was not really angry at who she was doing what with, he was angry that she was not nervous at all before the exams. Which one of the others did not study day and night when they participated in the major yen examinations? She, on the other hand, was out strolling in the middle of the night. Ah Shu. Chapter 215. It's so late. Why are you here? Yushu looked at the approaching figure and spoke. Jing Chen turned around as well, and he was slightly surprised to see that the person who came was Shui Rui. Shui Rui met Jing Chen's gaze and nodded. The two of them were considered to have greeted each other. Then he said to Yushu, "I have to go out on a business trip for a few days. I came to find you to calculate my schedule. Is it convenient for you now?" Yushu felt strange that the Shui family didn't even have a guest fortune teller. Why did he need to come to her for such a daily thing? However, she still answered, "Why not? Have you had dinner?" Shui Rui nodded. Then he looked at the food in their hands and asked, "You haven't eaten yet?" Yushu raised the sugar cake in her hand. "It's too cold to cook. Let's go and buy some. Let's go back to my home first." Shui Rui glanced at Jing Chen and nodded. Okay. Yu Shu didn't think much about Shui Rui's sudden visit. She took him home. Yu Xiaoxia was very happy to see Shui Rui. He called him Brother Shui and ran to the kitchen to boil water and make tea without Yu Shu's order. Jing Chen walked behind Yu Shu and Shui Rui and placed the food in his hands on the table. Initially he wanted to return to his room, but when he reached the door he thought about it again. Xiaoyu had become a woman now, so it was not convenient for her to be in the same room as a man. Thus he stood at the door and did not walk out. He turned around and watched the two of them talk. Yu Shu led Shui Rui to sit down at the table and asked, "When will you go out? What do you want me to do?" Shui Rui said, "Tomorrow morning help me calculate the weather for the next few days. You've kept my 8 characters of the 8 trigrams of fortune from last time. Also, check if there's anything to avoid during this trip and if it's going smoothly." "Tomorrow morning? I'll do it for you now. Have a seat first." Yu Shu stood up and walked into the room. Shui Rui stopped her. "You haven't eaten yet. You eat first. I'm not in a hurry." Yu Shu waved her hand. "It's okay. I just ate." She turned around and saw Jing Chen still standing at the door. "Jing Chen, eat first. Don't wait for me." After that, she went into the inner room, lit the lamp and spread the paper. She took out the horoscope that Shui Rui left for her last time. It was rare for Shui Rui to ask her for help. She must do a thorough calculation. Moreover, Jing Chen was also here. She didn't know if it would affect him. Now, only Shui Rui and Jing Chen were left in the central room. For a moment it was quiet. Shui Rui stood up and walked one round in the living room that wasn't very big. He looked at Yu Shu, who was engrossed in her calculations and did not pay attention to what was happening outside the window. He turned around and looked at Jing Chen, who had been standing at the door and quietly watching him since just now. He asked, "Young swordsman Jing, why are you looking at me like that?" Jing Chen thought for a moment and said honestly, "I think you look familiar. I seem to have seen you before." Shui Rui smiled and walked back to the table. He shook his head and said, "Young hero Jing, if I had seen you before, I would never forget you. What a pity." What he meant was that they had never met before. Shui Rui then pointed to the empty seat across the table. "Sit down." Jing Chen walked over and sat down. His line of sight was still on Shui Rui's face. If it was someone else being stared at like this by Jing Chen, they would have long felt uncomfortable. However, Shui Rui acted as though nothing happened and asked, "You have been staying in Anling City for a period of time, right? I heard from Ashu that you came to the capital city to handle some matters. May I ask, how is the matter going?" Although Yu Shu didn't explain Jing Chen's background, Shui Rui got a lot of information from the case of the Taihing Chamber of Commerce. So he knew that Jing Chen was fished out of the river on the way. He was seriously injured and was taken care of by Yu Shu. Then he escaped from the boat with her. Shui Rui saw that Yu Shu was very close to Jing Chen. It was obvious that she was in distress. However, he was worried that Jing Chen, a man in the Jianghu, had a grudge against him and would harm Yu Shu sooner or later. Shui Rui knew as well that Yu Shu was a person that extremely valued friendship. When she encountered an assassin that night, she blocked Jing Chen's attack and rescued him. Because of this friendship, if he were to warn her to stay away from this person, it would surely cause her to be displeased, so he'd never asked her about the matter with Jing Chen. However, Shui Rui didn't want to see them spending so much time together, whether it was out of concern or selfishness. When Jing Chen heard Shui Rui's question, he thought in his heart that Yu Shu was lying again. In order to avoid exposing her lie, he carefully thought about how to answer before he finally said, "There's no progress. Perhaps we'll have to wait for a while longer." Shui Rui asked, "Is there any difficulty? If I may be so bold as to ask why you have come to Enling, if there is anything I can help with, I will definitely lend a hand." Jing Chen did not know how to lie in the first place. Faced with Shui Rui's questioning, he could not answer, so he became silent. Shui Rui continued to ask unhurriedly, "Is there something inconvenient to say?" "I want to find a person," Jing Chen said slowly. Although he was hiding something, it was the truth. He lost his memory and got a hint in his dream. He went down the mountain to find a fate breaker, but he didn't know who that person was and where he was. Shui Rui's eyes flashed. He clasped his fingers on the table and looked at Jing Chen. He said seriously, "Is it a relative or a friend? If you are looking for someone, why don't you tell me the physical characteristics of that person? I have some connections in the capital and can help you find out." When he finished, Jing Chen shook his head and didn't say anything else. Just as Shui Rui was pondering over the meaning behind his shake of the head, Yu Xiaoxiu pushed open the door and walked in with a teapot in hand. As a result, Shui Rui changed the topic and said, "Since it's not convenient to talk about it, you can tell me when young hero needs help." Jing Chen nodded, "Thank you." Yu Xiaoxiu poured a cup of hot tea for Shui Rui and Jing Chen respectively. Then he sat beside Shui Rui and asked shyly, "Brother Shui, how long will you be away?" He was worried that Shui Rui promised to take him on horseback riding. He was worried that once he went out, he wouldn't be able to come back, and then the promise would not be valid. Yu Shu came to the capital and became financially independent. Yu Xiaoxiu didn't have the pressure of living in the Ji family. He played with people of the same age and soon showed his childishness. He was not playful, but he was not the same as before. He only knew how to study and do housework by himself and didn't care about anything else. Yu Shu hoped that he could be more cheerful and less restrained. Fortunately, Yu Xiaoxiu was very obedient, which made people feel at ease. Shui Rui reached out to touch his head and said with a smile, "I will be back in 6 or 7 days at most. Don't you have a holiday on the 5th and 6th of next month? When I come back, I will take you on horseback riding." Okay. Yu Xiaoxiu was both shy and a little happy that his thoughts were pointed out. His stomach growled. He opened the cooked food on the table and handed a roasted meat to Shui Rui first. Shui Rui said, "I have had dinner." Yu Xiaoxiu rummaged in the oiled paper again and picked up a tea egg. He turned to Jing Chen, who couldn't use his right hand, and said, "Brother Jing, let me peel an egg for you." Okay. About an hour later, Yu Shu came out of the room with various kinds of comments in her hand. She handed it to Shui Rui and said, "It's nothing serious. Just that you might encounter the first snow when you go out for a few days. Be careful of the slippery road and don't rush back and forth. Be careful of being trapped on the road." In ancient times, roads were not accessible in all directions. Not far from the city was the suburbs. The roads in the suburbs were not easy to travel on. Once there was heavy rain and snow, the roads would be muddy and slippery, and it was common for the horses to fall and overturn. The deeper they went into the winter, the colder the weather became. Yu Shu was an expert in the prediction of sunny and rainy days, but she had yet to conduct in-depth research on the more complicated weather changes. She could not tell if there was a sign of snow during the 12th month of the lunar calendar. However, she still intentionally reminded Shui Rui. Shui Rui remembered Yu Shu's instructions and folded the note before putting it into his sleeve. When he saw that it was getting late, he stood up and bid farewell. "I still have to wake up early tomorrow, so I won't be staying any longer." Seeing that he was about to leave, Yu Shu hesitated for a moment. She took the lantern behind the door and said to Shui Rui, "It's dark outside. I'll see you off." She wasn't a person who liked to drag her feet. Since she wanted to make it clear to Shui Rui, since she saw him today, there was no time like the present. If she delayed it until the start of the Grand Yen examination, it would be a burden on her mind and distract her. Before Shui Rui could say anything, Jing Chen said, "I'll see you off." Hearing this, Shui Rui, who had already walked to the door, turned his head and looked at him. Then he looked at Yu Shu and said with a smile, "Don't bother. The sedan is waiting on the street outside. I won't get lost in the dark." Jing Chen's thinking was very simple. In the past, he treated Yu Shu as a man. He didn't think there was anything wrong with her occasionally walking at night. But after knowing that she was a woman, he couldn't help but think more. Yu Shu probably guessed Jing Chen's thinking. She was amused that she suddenly became delicate in his eyes. Because she had something to say to Shui Rui, she said to Jing Chen, "I'll see him off at the entrance of the alley." Jing Chen thought that it wasn't far from the alley, so he didn't say anything else. Seeing that Yu Shu insisted on seeing him off, Shui Rui thought that she had something else to say. He said goodbye to Jing Chen and Yu Xiaoxiu and followed her out with the lantern. At this time, half of the neighbors had closed their doors and turned off their lights. They washed up and went to bed. The stray cats also found a corner of their houses to avoid the cold. The alley was quiet. There was only a lantern illuminating the road 5 feet ahead. 2 figures were an arm's length away from each other as they walked on the potholed path. "How was your preparation? I heard from Xiaomiao that you only went to Taisher Library twice and didn't go any more." "I've read the files over the years and I know what I'm doing. I'm afraid that I'll cause trouble for young Master Feng if I go again. The other subjects are easy to deal with, but I'm not good at choosing words and constructing sentences for Yili. I'm afraid that I'll go astray from the topic and do badly." As Yu Shu answered, she pondered over how to broach the subject to Shui Rui. "And don't worry. When the time comes, you just have to write clearly. Remember to take good care of your exam notice and don't lose it." Shui Rui reminded her and changed the topic. "Oh right, you won't go out tomorrow?" This month, the Supreme Court of Justice will give out offerings and there will be an extra 30 caddies of coal. I'll send someone to send it to you. The last time Shui Rui came, he found that Yushu's house did not have a charcoal fire. It was fine a while ago, but today there was a winter rain and it was going to freeze. If there was no charcoal fire, the winter would be hard to endure. She also had to take an exam. If she studied at night without a charcoal fire, it would be easy to freeze her hands and feet. If it snowed, she might catch a cold and fall sick. Yushu's expression changed. She turned around to look at Shui Rui, and she happened to meet his gaze that was filled with warmth. She suddenly felt slightly agitated, so she pursed her lips and suddenly stopped walking. Shui Rui also stopped following her. What's wrong? Shui Rui finally found that something was wrong with her. Brother Shui. Yushu looked away and looked at the hazy light and shadow on the road. She lowered her voice. Don't waste any more time on me. We can only be friends. Shui Rui was slightly stunned as he went over Yushu's words that came out of nowhere in his mind. Only then did he come back to his senses, and when he saw the indifferent expression on Yushu's face, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up to reveal a wisp of a mysterious smile. He thought that this girl was born with a lack of a brain. He didn't think that she was clear in her heart. Shui Rui was not impatient at this time. Instead, he lowered his head and quietly asked her, "Since we are friends, I should be more concerned about you. What's wrong with that?" Sensing his approach and smelling a wisp of the light fragrance of books, Yushu switched the lantern in her hand to another hand and took half a step back without anyone noticing. She sighed softly and said in a low voice, "It's not appropriate. I already have someone I like. I can't accept your kindness for no reason." Yushu's head was lowered so she couldn't see Shui Rui's expression. She was so nervous that her palms were sweating, waiting for his reaction. Actually, this matter was a little unethical of her. As early as when Shui Rui took over the case of Taiheng Commerce, she had already been aware of his intentions. Later on, it was clear that on the day when he came to look for her for the Great Yen examination, she asked him why he was taking care of her so much. At that time he asked her a rhetorical question. She knew clearly in her heart, but she pretended to be confused. She didn't know what he saw in her. Otherwise she really wanted to change. With the difference in status between the two of them, it was her bad luck that he took a liking to her. Now that she was being honest with him, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't worried about angering him. It was true that Shui Rui treated her with a good temper, but that day at the Dingbo Hall, she personally saw his sarcastic words with a prince. She knew that he was a person who would turn hostile. This was one of the top debauches in the capital. How could it be easy to provoke him? Just as Yushu was feeling uneasy, a hand gently fell on her shoulder. Shui Rui's overly calm voice entered her ears. "It's getting late. I'll send you here. You can go back." Finishing his words, the hand on her shoulder left, not lingering for a moment. Yushu slowly raised her head. She could only see a gradually blurring figure in front of her. She tightly gripped the flickering lantern in her hand and dryly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Logically speaking, with Shui Rui's lukewarm reaction, she should be relieved. However, for some reason she felt that this matter wasn't over yet. After Shui Rui left, Yushu stood alone in the dark alley for a long time until Jing Chen came out to look for her. "Xiaoyu, what are you doing standing there?" Yushu snapped back to reality. She felt the cold wind blowing on her face. Shrinking her neck, she turned around and jogged towards Jing Chen. She handed the lantern to him and raised her hand in front of her face to breathe. "I'm freezing. Go home quickly." Chapter 216. The next day, someone went to Huixing Street to deliver charcoal. 2 heavy baskets were carried to the door. Yushu came out to answer the door. She saw that the 2 porters were sweating profusely, but she was too embarrassed to ask them to carry the baskets back. After breakfast, a few women in the alley came out to wash the dishes and pots. When they saw the baskets, they surrounded Yushu's door to look at them. They pointed at the neatly stacked black kiln charcoal in the baskets and clicked their tongues. For ordinary people living in the south of the city, the charcoal they used in the winter was collected from the cooking stoves. Buying charcoal from the kiln to keep warm was a luxury. "Yuxing, how much does 1 kilo of charcoal cost? Why did you buy so much? Can you burn it all?" Aunt Sue, who lived across the street, had dealings with Yushu's family and asked her in a familiar tone. "It's cold this year. It's good to prepare more," Yushu joked. More and more people gathered in front of the door, so she quickly asked the porters to carry the baskets in. Not only did Shui Rui send the charcoal over, he even meticulously attached 2 flat stoves. The stoves were squarish and had a charcoal pit dug out in the middle. The stoves were made of iron and were very heavy. It was no wonder that the two porters were sweating profusely. Yushu asked someone to put the baskets and the iron stoves in the corner of the central room. She went into the room to get a handful of copper coins. After thanking the porters, she sent them away. She closed the door and returned to the room. She saw Jing Chen standing in front of the baskets, curiously looking at a piece of charcoal. Is this also used to keep warm? Jing Chen turned to ask Yushu. Yes, to keep warm. Yushu walked in front of him and stared at the charcoal stove on the ground. She felt awkward. Previously, she had been able to treat Shui Rui's kindness as a friendship between friends. But last night she had made things clear. She couldn't accept his kindness with peace of mind. But he had come from afar to carry it. If she refused, could she let him carry it back? That would be too pretentious. She was very grateful to Shui Rui. After all, she owed him so much that she could write an account book on it. As the saying goes, the tongue is soft when the tongue is soft when the hand is short when the hand is taken. She really didn't want to make things difficult for him unless it was absolutely necessary. Jing Chen put the charcoal back into the basket and asked Yushu, "Did Mr. Shui send these over?" "Yes." Jing Chen said, "He takes good care of you, brother and sister? He is a good man." Hearing Jing Chen's evaluation of Shui Rui, Yushu's expression changed, and she tilted her head to look at him. Jing Chen didn't know why she was looking at him like this. "What's wrong?" "What a fool," Yushu whispered. She bent down to pick up an iron stove and planned to carry it into the bedroom. Jing Chen saw that it was heavy, so he hurriedly reached out to take it. Yushu wanted to avoid it, but she wasn't faster than him. Jing Chen took the iron stove from her arms and asked her, "Where do you put it?" Yushu didn't have any temper with him. Seeing that he didn't need his injured hand, she pointed to the remaining iron stove on the ground and said, "Me and Xiaoxiu have one in the room and you have one in the room." Jing Chen hesitated and said, "I'm not afraid of the cold." "No need. Put one in the living room, it will be warm when we eat." He was not afraid of the cold, but Yushu was afraid that he would catch a cold, so she said, "It will be colder in a few days. The mattress on your bed is not thick. It's better to put one in the room and burn it before going to bed. As for eating, you can move it out of my room." So, one of the two stoves was placed in Jing Chen's room. Before Yushu transmigrated, her family was very ordinary. When she was young, she lived in the countryside and used a charcoal stove in a relative's house. She tried to burn a few pieces of charcoal that Shui Rui sent over. After fiddling with it for a while, she found that there was no smoke, so she lit both stoves and closed the door. It didn't take long for the room to become warm. The little guy, Kim Bao, came out of nowhere and squatted next to the stove. Yushu thought it was dirty, so she took the opportunity to grab it and put it in the hot water basin to wash it. The little Goldie was unwilling to take a bath in the winter, so it almost shouted until its throat broke. In the end, it still couldn't escape the bath. Carrying the half-wet Kim Bao to the stove, Yushu dried its hair while telling Jing Chen about the safety precautions to pay attention to the ventilation when burning charcoal. She also taught him how to extinguish the stove. When Yu Xiaoxiu returned home, she saw that there was a stove in the room. It was very rare. Before dinner, she moved a stool around the stove to warm her hands, and her little face was red from the smoke. At night, Jing Chen sat alone in front of the window. Under the light of the candlelight, he flipped through the Taoist classics on the desk. He heard the sound of Yushu closing the door and bolting the door. He put the book upside down on the table and walked to the bed. At the foot of the bed there was a red stove. It was Yushu who came to the room to burn it for him after dinner. Jing Chen bent down and closed the iron lid. After a while he opened it again. Seeing that the fire in the stove was extinguished, he returned to the table and continued to read. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the first day of the 12th lunar month, the traders in the entire Enling city finally welcomed the triennial Grand Yen examination. There was no grand prologue, but there was a different atmosphere everywhere in the city. The comprehensive examination of the 6 subjects became the biggest topic, and everyone had their eyes on this year's Grand Yen examination. Yushu got up when the sky was dim. She was the one who was going to take the examination, and Yu Xiaoxiu was even more nervous than her. He didn't sleep well the whole night. As soon as he heard the sound of her getting up, he immediately got up, hurriedly put on his clothes and ran to the kitchen to prepare the stove. Jing Chen got up earlier than the siblings. He had already started a fire in the kitchen and boiled the hot water. Yu Xiaoxiu went into the house to take out a string of copper coins. He carried a big bowl and ran to the street to buy breakfast. The only one who was still in bed was Kim Bao. He was sleeping soundly under Yu Xiaoxiu's pillow. The exam candidates were the oldest, so Yushu was happy to enjoy the special treatment. After washing up, she put on a new set of clothes. Although she didn't need to hide her gender in front of Jingchen anymore, and the Grand Yen examination was a female school, she still dressed like a young man and didn't change back into female clothes. One reason was that she didn't have a dress for the winter, so she didn't have to change. 2. She felt that wearing a robe was more comfortable than wearing a dress, so she didn't waste money to buy one. Yushu put the brush, ink and paper she needed for the examination into a small bookcase. She carefully checked it and put away the most important exam paper. She leaned against the door of the bedroom and quietly looked at Jing Chen, who was arranging the bowls and chopsticks in front of the dining table, and Yu Xiaoxiu, who was squatting by the stove adding charcoal. Her heart was at peace. She couldn't help but think of many years ago when she was still a young student. That big exam was in full swing. Her parents and younger brother were also like this, carefully surrounding her for 2 whole days and 2 nights. That was the last time she was nervous and timid when she said goodbye to her youth. It was the same scene, but now she was in a different state of mind. After experiencing time and growing up, for a person who had crossed 500 years of history, what she felt at this moment was more joy. Joy that she had lived one more life, and joy that she could have today. Big brother, come and eat. Yu Xiaoxiu pulled out a stool and called Yushu over. Yushu walked to the table and sat down. She took the spoon he handed to her and looked up at Jing Chen, who was drinking soup. She turned to Yu Xiaoxiu and said, "Call me big sister, your big brother Jing already knows." Jing Chen's movements stopped. Yu Xiaoxiu's mouth opened wide in hindsight. Yushu picked up a steamed bun and stuffed it into his mouth, saying, "Eat quickly." Putting the sweet porridge in front of Yushu, Jing Chen slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a smile. Although Shui Rui said that he would send someone to pick up Yushu, she still rented a carriage in advance in case of an accident. As it turned out, it was unnecessary. As soon as she got out of the alley, she saw a carriage waiting at the north end of the street. The red cover of the carriage was pulled by a strong horse. It was clearly not parked in a residential area in the south of the city. Although it was not the carriage that Shui Rui always sat in, Yushu had seen the thin and tall coachman standing outside the carriage several times. That time when Shui Rui took her to visit Xia Zhang's family, it was this coachman named Old Shui who drove the carriage. Yushu wanted to take a detour, but the coachman had sharp eyes and waved at her from afar. She couldn't pretend not to see him even if she wanted to, so she could only walk up with a smile. "Old Shui. Miss, please get on the carriage. I will send you to Taiching Department." Old Shui smiled and rolled up the curtain of the carriage. Yushu didn't want to embarrass a servant, so she got on the carriage. The inside of the carriage was warmed up, which was totally different from the outside. There was a small round table in the middle of the carriage and the tea was warm. There were 2 plates of snacks, which looked so exquisite that people couldn't bear to eat them. The seat was lined with a thick layer of skin, which was smooth and soft, and she didn't know what animal it was. Yushu sat on the seat for a while. She felt comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. She was indeed a person who liked to enjoy life. In her previous life, she did some wicked things and spent most of the money she earned on Yulei, but she never treated herself badly. She ate and wore what she needed, and as long as she could afford it, she was not reluctant to spend it. She became stingy after she transmigrated. However, the enjoyment she liked was to be self-sufficient. Even if the money she earned was black-hearted, it was also her ability. She didn't want to sit around and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Fortunately, the carriage ran fast and soon they arrived at the north of the city. There were 5 departments under the Celestial Commissioner, and this Taiching department was one of them. It was also the largest department. It was located on the main street of Shihua Prefecture, occupying 10 acres of land. In front of the door there was a wide road that could accommodate 4 or 5 carriages. But today the street was very crowded. Everyone who came here were examinees. Not to mention the carriage, it was difficult for people to squeeze in. Yushu got off the carriage at the corner of the street, carried her bookcase and followed the crowd to the gate of Taiching Department. In front of the gate there were 2 rows of 12 officials. They had swords on their waists and sticks in their hands. They looked very dignified. Therefore the gate was empty. No one was allowed to come close until the examination time. There was a notice posted on the wall outside the gate. Many people gathered below to look at it. It was noisy and chaotic. Yushu hugged her bookcase and spent a lot of effort to squeeze to the front. She looked up at the notice. It turned out that there was an official ban on documents, similar to what examinees should pay attention to. Yushu noted it down one by one. If there was anything she didn't understand, she would smile and ask the people around her. After a long time, the girls' school had to enter from another gate. Yushu hurriedly asked for directions and squeezed out again. When she was near the end of the street, she found the west gate of Taiching Department. There were a lot fewer people here. What she saw were all women. Of course, there were a few like Yushu who wore long robes and had their hair tied up in a bun. Chapter 217. The first subject of the Dian exam is Yili, which is located in the Taiching Department. Men and women are not separated, one is in the east courtyard and the other is in the west courtyard. There is a long queue in front of the two doors. Everyone has to be searched before entering to prevent the candidates from smuggling anything. The only difference is that there are several female servants in charge of the search in front of the west courtyard. Yushu queues with the crowd and looks at the candidates in front and behind her. She finds that there are not many old people here. They are all young girls in their teens. They are well-dressed and obviously come from a good family. Yushu is wondering if she will meet Ji Xingxuan here, but there are too many people here. She glances around and doesn't see the signature veil of the fourth daughter of the Ji family, so she doesn't pay special attention to it. Anyway, she is here, so she is not afraid of running into her. One by one, Yushu goes to the door. She is patted up and down by the female servant, and her book box is turned over. Finally, she gets a number plate. After registering at the writing officer, she is led into the gate of the Taiching Department and is assigned to a line. Once there are more than 30 candidates, they are led along the high wall to the examination hall of the inner courtyard under the guidance of several officials. Don't whisper or look around. Follow the people in front. Under the orders of the officials, the candidates keep quiet and the atmosphere is very dull. No matter if they know the people in front of them or not, they just look down at the road in front of them. Everyone is afraid of making a mistake and losing the great opportunity of the 3 years, so they don't dare to act rashly. Before entering the hospital, Yushu imagined what the examination hall would look like. She thought it would be a prison like the place she saw in the TV series. However, when she is really led to the place, she finds that it is not a closed place, or rather, it is even worse than the prison examination hall. Rather than calling it an examination hall, it would be more accurate to call it an extremely spacious rooftop. There were entrances on the east and west sides, and 16 flights of stairs leading up to it. On the rooftop, there were hundreds of short tables and chairs set up in a crisscross pattern. Many examinees were already seated on their seats. Dozens of felt blankets were laid out on the walkway. There was a fence every 10 steps. Red, green, and white banners were fluttering in the wind. Yushu was stunned speechless. It was such a cold day and they still had to take an outdoor test. No matter how unwilling she was, she still obediently followed behind the examiner. Relying on the number plate in her hand, she was arranged to sit in the examination hall. The moment her butt touched the chair, a gust of cold wind blew over, causing her to shiver. She quickly hid her hands in her sleeves, in case her hands froze and she couldn't write properly. She took the opportunity to sneak a glance at her surroundings. It was rumored that the number of female transvestites in the grand examination was, at most, less than 10% of the number of male transvestites. In this examination hall, she estimated that there were no less than 500 or 600 seats. Each seat was separated by a distance of half a zhang, and there were 2 servants patrolling along each aisle. Just by moving their heads they would be able to see all the seats around them. Apart from that, there was a warm shed on the south and north sides respectively, with a few examiners seated inside. The sound of drums could be heard from the front. After 12 times, Yushu saw a servant at the front carrying a stack of papers and handing them out. She unhurriedly opened her book box and placed paper, ink, and other materials on the table. She wasn't in a hurry to grind the ink. When she received the papers, she first scanned through them. There were a total of 6 questions and all of them were based on the theory of Yili. In Yushu's eyes, 4 of the questions were solutions. As long as one seriously read through the various parts of the Yili, one would be able to answer all of them. However, the 2 dialectical questions were the most difficult. One must know that she was a true science student, and the most troublesome thing for her was to ponder over words. Thus, when most of the examinees around her had begun to write with great speed, she was holding on to the papers and worrying. Over the years, the Yili examination papers would usually have 1 dialectical question. It was rare for there to be 2 this year. She could only say that she was unlucky. Fortunately, Yushu had a good attitude. She took the time to grind the ink and pondered for a while before picking up the brush to answer the papers. She wasn't in a hurry. Even if there were questions that she couldn't answer, she had to write neatly. The examination went on until noon. Yushu had written everything that she could and pulled apart everything that she could. The wind blew on her nose and her stomach was growling with hunger. Her hands were so cold that they had long lost their senses. She finally put down the brush and glanced at the front. Seeing that many of the examinees were empty, she sniffled and slowly raised her hand. Thus, an examiner came forward and marked the end of her paper with a red brush. He tied her up with a rope and gestured for a servant to take her away from the examination hall. As soon as she got off the rooftop, Yushu rubbed her palms fiercely. As she blew into her palms, she lightly stomped her feet. She wished that there was a pot of fire for her to jump into right now. It was really freezing. No wonder this examination had to be held for 3 days after the end of the examination. If it continued like this, 7,000 out of 8,000 examinees would fall ill. What was the point of continuing with the examination? After exiting the Taiching department from the west gate, Yushu's steps finally relaxed. The next subject was feng shui. She didn't intend to go there. She was waiting for the next subject, astrology. In between she could relax for a few days. Oh right, she almost forgot that she still had to see Bai Qing and Qiu Biao being beheaded on the 3rd day of the new year. Many people were waiting for the examinees in front of the gate. Some were family members and some were maids and manservants. When they saw the examinees coming out, they hurriedly went forward to welcome them, helping to carry the bookcase and hand the hand stove. Originally Yu Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen wanted to come and pick up Yushu. But she refused them because it was troublesome. In fact, she didn't want them to wait outside in this cold weather. But now she saw people greeting her when she came out. She was alone, so she couldn't help but feel a little envious. The coachman, Lao Chue, was waiting for her on the street. When he saw her figure from afar, he waved at her as if he was afraid that she couldn't see him. Yushu was happy. She quickened her steps and trotted to the side of the carriage. She thanked him. "Hey Lao Chue, I'm sorry to make you wait outside in this cold weather." Lao Chue smiled and pulled the curtain of the carriage. "I'm fine. Miss, you must be cold. Get in the carriage and sit down." Yushu nodded and hurriedly climbed into the carriage to avoid the wind. She immediately shivered because of the warm air inside the carriage. She breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but praise Master Xue. "Miss, you have been hungry for the whole morning. Do you want to find a place to eat first before going back?" Lao Chue asked. Yushu took a piece of cake from the plate on the table and stuffed it into her mouth. She swallowed it and waved her hand at Lao Chue. "No, please send me home." When Yushu returned home, the first thing she did was pour a basin of hot water to wash her frozen hands and face. Jing Chen saw that her nose was red from the cold, so he moved the stove in his room to her room and stoked the fire. Yushu set up the pot and threw a piece of ginger into it to boil. She sniffed and said to Jing Chen, who had come to the kitchen to look for her, "I can't take it anymore. I have to go back to bed." Jing Chen looked at the stove. "When the water is boiling, pour it into a bowl for me." After saying that, she ran into the room, took off her shoes and jacket, shook off the quilt and got on the bed. She covered herself tightly. Kim Bao was sleeping at the end of the bed. It was woken up by her movement. It quickly jumped to the side of the bed to her pillow and chirped at her. Its thin tail gently swept her forehead. It seemed to be acting coquettishly. It was hungry. "Go away, I'm still hungry." Yushu pushed it down with one finger and reached under the pillow. She rummaged around and found a pouch. She took out the yellow frost stone hidden inside and rubbed it in her palms. Not long after, she felt her palms warm up. Now that she knew that this small bead was very precious, she didn't dare to take it with her today. She was afraid that she would accidentally lose it when she searched her body. Holding the yellow frost stone in her hand, Yushu lay on the bed and looked at it. This small yellow bead, which was as big as a marble, was smooth. If she looked closely, she could see some natural stone patterns on it. It was different from jade. She still remembered that she saw Ji Xingxuan wearing it on her hand in the library of Taishu Shuyuan. It was hanging with a red string and it looked very beautiful. Thinking of Ji Xingxuan, Yushu's thoughts jumped to another thing. The exam paper that Yunhua Ez took in the Grand Yen examination. She used that exam paper to exchange for the yellow frost stone. Now it was in the hands of the Ji family. At the same time, it proved her guess. There was an old question in this year's Grand Yen examination. It was the 3-star question from 20 years ago. At that time, she was focused on how to get the yellow frost stone back and didn't think much about other things. Now that she thought about it, Yunhua Ez's answer to that question was really interesting. A son will be born in this year. Great fortune will bring disaster. This sentence, literally, meant that a person who carried great fortune and disaster was about to be born. Thinking about this answer, she couldn't help but think of Jing Chen. She didn't know anyone who had great fortune, but from what she knew, there was no one who was more worthy of the words "bring disaster" than Jing Chen of Tianchong's K Star. What was interesting was that this exam paper happened to be 20 years ago. This was a written question, so the examinees back then didn't actually see this celestial phenomenon. She didn't know when the person who came up with this question saw this celestial phenomenon. If the celestial phenomenon happened to appear that year, then Yunhua Ez's answer would be thought-provoking. This person who carried great fortune and disaster should be around 20 years old. He was about the same age as Jing Chen. If it wasn't for the fact that Jing Chen didn't fit the description of carrying great fortune, she would really suspect that the person who came up with this question was him. The same question appeared again after 20 years. Yushu couldn't be blamed for thinking too much. She always felt that this matter wasn't that simple. Maybe there was a deeper meaning behind it. 20 years ago, Yun Mufeng, who answered this question, became Yunhua Ez. Then, 20 years later, what kind of future would the person who answered the same question have? Yushu's finger lightly stroked her chin. She smiled coldly. Due to all kinds of considerations, she didn't plan to answer this question. Because of this, the astrology exam that she was originally very confident in would be ruined. However, if she couldn't take advantage of it, then Ji Xingxuan wouldn't be able to pass the exam smoothly. Regarding this question of 3 stars, whether or not it was what she thought it was, she had to mess it up. Chapter 218. In ancient times, executions were usually carried out in autumn or winter, not in spring or summer, so there was a saying that executions were carried out after the execution. Executions were usually carried out in crowded and bustling streets. The reason was that executions were carried out in large public places. Firstly, it was to warn the common people, and secondly, it was to suppress the evilness of the dead. Therefore, executions were usually carried out at noon, when the sun was the highest. On the 3rd day of the 12th lunar month, before Yu Xiaoxiu went to school, Yushu hung the house key around his neck and gave him a tail. She told him to have dinner outside when he came back in the afternoon, and that she and Jing Chen would be back late. Yu Xiaoxiu was a sensible person. He knew that the two of them were going to watch the execution. Seeing that Yushu had no intention of bringing him along, he didn't make a fuss. Instead, he walked out of the door with a serious expression on his face. While it was still early, Yushu cooked the 3 caddies of eggs she bought yesterday. The tea eggs on the street cost 15 copper coins each, and they were bland and tasteless. She had a slightly salty taste, so she cooked them according to her preferences. They wouldn't go bad in the winter, and they could be eaten as breakfast in the morning. When she was hungry, she could peel one. The pot was stewing on the fire. Yushu washed her hands and went to Jing Chen's room to change the dressing on his hand. The wound had been growing for almost a month, but the scab hadn't completely fallen off. After removing the gauze, she saw that there was one across the joints of his 4 fingers and one across his palm. It looked like there were 2 long worms crawling on it, which made Yushu frown. Jing Chen tried to shake his hand and felt that there was no problem, so he discussed with Yushu, "It doesn't hurt or itch, so there's no need to apply medicine, right?" Yushu said, "It's fine if you don't apply medicine on your hand. Then from tomorrow on you can drink medicine soup instead." Jing Chen obediently extended his right hand to her. Compared to drinking the medicine, it was better to apply it on his hand. After the medicine was changed and the tea eggs were cooked, the two of them tidied up. Yushu wrapped a few hot tea eggs and slung a small bag over her shoulder. She locked the door and left with Jing Chen. Since coming to the capital, Jing Chen had almost never gone out during the day. Today they were going to Changchun Street, the place they went to when they changed back to Yellow Frost Stone not long ago in the heavy rain. Therefore, Yushu didn't let him wear the distinctive bamboo hat. She was afraid that the Ji family wouldn't give up and would secretly look for them. Anyway, she was with them, so she was not afraid that he would have any contact with others. With the Yellow Frost Stone, Yushu felt was very safe. "Here, have a taste of what I made. Is it as good as the one sold in Second Sun's shop?" Yushu peeled a tea egg and handed it to Jing Chen first. Then she threw the egg skin on the roadside. It was not her fault for being uncivilized. In ancient times, there were no garbage bins on the roadside, and there were no aunties and aunties with armbands patrolling the streets. Littering and spitting didn't warrant a fine. Jing Chen took it and tasted it. After eating it, he commented, "It's a little salty." "Salty?" Yushu peeled another one and took a bite. She secretly frowned. It was indeed salty. He knew that she put 2 more spoonfuls of salt in it, but he still said shamelessly, "Tea eggs are delicious when they are salty." Jing Qin never argued with Yu Shu. Basically whatever she said, it was. They didn't take a taxi. They walked past Automosmanthus Square. Then Yu Shu led Jing Qin to a cloth shop in the alley where she often bought clothes. She picked out the cloth on the counter for a long time. Finally she chose a color. She gestured on it and asked the shopkeeper to cut a small piece. Jing Qin stood beside her and quietly looked at the decoration in the shop without saying a word. The shopkeeper recognized that she was a regular customer. Seeing that she asked for such a small piece of cloth, he kindly offered to give it to her. Yu Shu didn't refuse. She also asked for a fine needle. They went out of the cloth shop. Yu Shu turned to ask Jing Qin, "Why don't you ask me what I want such a small piece of cloth for?" Jing Qin asked, "What do you want it for?" "I'm not telling you." Jing Qin was often teased by her. After getting used to it, he slowly realized that the more he argued with her, the more energetic she became. It was best not to argue with her. Seeing that he didn't pursue the matter, Yu Shu lost interest. She touched her nose resentfully and took the initiative to gesture with her hand. "I plan to sew a small pocket and sew the yellow frost stone into it. I'll make a talisman with me so that I won't lose it again." "Okay." Jing Qin nodded. "That's good." The two accompanied each other all the way from the south of the city to Qinyuan Street. It was not noon yet. Yu Shu had eaten 3 salted eggs on the way and was already thirsty. Therefore, she and Jing Qin found a restaurant and sat by the window on the 2nd floor. They only ordered a bowl of sweet winter melon soup and a plate of vinegar peanuts. The execution ground was built at the end of the street where people came and went. Yu Shu opened the window and looked outside. She said to Jing Qin, "See that? It's the platform over there. Let's just sit here and watch. There's no need to go down and squeeze with the others." Not long after she finished speaking, a group of officers and soldiers escorted prison carts past on the street below. Inside the 7 or 8 prison carts were all prisoners on death row. All of them had disheveled hair and dirty faces. Their hands were shackled and their heads were hanging down in a half-dead state. Evil people. Murderers. Smash them. Smash them. No one knew who took the lead, but the people on both sides of the street suddenly became agitated. They threw rotten vegetable leaves and smelly wicker baskets at the prison carts, smashing the prisoners' heads and faces. They were in a sorry state and had nowhere to hide. The officers did not stop them. They only scolded them when someone got too close. After looking for a long time, Yu Shu finally recognized which carriage Huan Biao and Bai Qing were in. She quickly pointed them out to Jing Chen and whispered, "Look over there. The bearded one in front is Qiu Biao. The one in the back is Bai Qing with a head full of rotten eggs." This was the first time Jing Chen saw these two people after 3 months of escaping from the ship. Originally, the hatred between them had faded, but when he thought of the killer who killed Yu Shu in front of his house that night, he couldn't help but frown. He felt that they deserved to die. The prisoners were escorted to the execution platform one by one. More and more people gathered at the end of the street. There were also many people in the restaurant who wanted to watch the hot draw. They all surrounded the windows. When noon arrived, the drum was beaten 3 times, and a few burly executioners carried their swords forward. They removed the death duel cards on the backs of the criminals, and raised the countless blades in their hands high, waiting for the next order. Yu Shu's eyes were wide open. She was afraid that she couldn't help but close her eyes. Thinking of the bloody scene she was about to see, her palms were sweaty. In fact, she was not very brave. She was especially afraid of death. Not only was she afraid of her own death, but she was also afraid of seeing others die. She had lived for decades and lived 2 lives. She had always been unwilling to die without revenge. However, this was the first time she took revenge on someone to death. Once everything was over, besides venting her anger, there was always a little fear in her heart. This was human nature. If there was no fear, then she was really cold-blooded and heartless. Jing Chen looked at her like this. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something. However, the judge on the execution platform had already thrown down the fire stick. "It's time to die. Execute." As the knife rose and fell, Yu Shu's vision suddenly darkened. She held her breath and wanted to push away the palm in front of her. However, her hand fell back halfway. There was a moment of silence on the street, followed by a buzzing sound in her ears. Her throat was dry. She took a breath and asked, "Is it chopped off?" Jing Chen blocked her with one hand and looked at the bloody execution platform. "Yes." After a moment of silence, Yu Shu pulled down Jing Chen's hand. She didn't look at the street anymore. She turned around and sat back to her seat. She patted the table and called the waiter, "Bring a pot of wine and a plate of lung slices. The spicier the better." When the dishes and wine were served, Yushu first took a bite of the red ox tongue and then took a sip of wine. It was spicy enough. When the hot air rushed to her head, she immediately felt comfortable. She looked up and saw Jing Chen looking at her without blinking. There was a clear worry on his face. She raised the pot of wine and smiled at him. "Come, drink a cup with me. I won't blame you for covering my eyes just now." Jing Chen took the empty cup and handed it to her. Yushu filled his cup and poured a cup for herself. She clinked glasses with him and thought for a moment before saying, "Let's have a happy ending." "Yes, happy ending." Jing Chen also copied her and clinked glasses with her. Yushu drank the cup in one gulp. Jing Chen drank slowly, but he also finished the cup in one gulp. Yushu looked at his empty cup with satisfaction. Then she drank the wine and ate the plate of spicy lung slices. She didn't pour another cup for him. She had a good capacity for alcohol, but Jing Chen didn't drink. One cup was enough. After all, he still had business in the evening. After watching the execution, Yushu and Jing Chen went to another tea house. They found a seat in the corner and listened to the storyteller at the center of the tea house tell a Jianghu joke. They asked for a pot of green tea to relieve the alcohol. "Let's talk about the young lady that Prince Xiang met on the boat earlier. She is actually a wealthy merchant in Guangdong. He is said to own 100 boats and is known as the over 1,000 sails. She is Wen Sui Sui, the precious daughter of Wen Hua Kun." When they met on the boat that day, Wen Sui Sui was attracted by Prince Xiang's beauty and admiration grew in her heart. However, when they met again in such a scene, she fell in love with him. Prince Xiang is also a romantic and passionate person. He is infatuated with Wen Sui Sui. Even though he already has a beautiful wife at home, he cannot help but be moved. The storyteller was not bad. As Yushu listened, she understood something. Prince Xiang? Wasn't this the father of heir Lu Jiong? It turned out that this joke wasn't about a novel, but the romantic affairs of a prince. No wonder everyone in the tea house was listening with great interest. However, as a prince, a relative of the emperor, his private affairs were made up and spread by others, but no one cared. It was really unbearable. Yushu didn't like to listen to this joke about a prince picking up a girl. She was also afraid that Jing Chen would learn bad things from it. After drinking the tea, she pulled him away. "Where are we going now?" Jing Chen followed Yushu aimlessly. He wasn't afraid that she would sell him out. "South of the city, Perrin Hall." Yushu told him the location. Feeling that it was too far, she hired 2 sedan chairs at the south of Kuanyuan Street. At first, Jing Chen didn't want to sit and said that she would sit alone in the sedan chair and he would follow. In the end, he was still pestered by Yushu and pushed into the sedan chair. Sitting in the enclosed sedan chair, there was no one to talk to. Yushu was still drunk, so she leaned against the window and dozed off. She only opened her eyes with a yawn when the sedan door was opened and the cold wind blew into her neck. Chapter 219. Training Hall in the south of the city is the gathering place for Dayan candidates from the 13 provinces in the north and south. Anyone with a letter of recommendation from a diviner in Anling can stay there after paying a certain amount of money. Training Hall is open all day long, probably because the food and accommodation here are cheaper than ordinary inns and restaurants. Every year in August it is always crowded. But this does not prevent diviners from coming during the day to ask about it. By the time Yushu and Jing Chen arrived at the Human Cultivation Hall, the sky had already darkened. After sending away the sedan bearers, the 2 of them entered the hall one after the other. In the front courtyard was a 2-story tea room. It was filled with people. Some were chatting, some were chatting. Their voices were not loud, but when added together, it created a buzzing noise. A few waiters walked back and forth with tea trays, and the shopkeeper occasionally called out, "Guests, there are seats inside. Please come in." A waiter takes the time to greet Yushu and Jing Chen who have just entered. Yushu waved her hand and said, "I am looking for someone. Where is the guest room?" The waiter smiled and said, "Who are you looking for?" Yushu said, "Zhao Wen." The waiter raised his head and thought for a while. He pointed in a direction and said, "Please go through the hall and turn right. It is the 2nd building on the east. It should be the 3rd room from the left." Yushu was surprised and said, "Brother waiter, you have a good memory. There are hundreds of guests in this training hall. How can you remember all of them?" "Haha, I serve tea and food all day long. I get to know them all." Yushu nodded and went to the backyard with Jing Chen to look for someone. As soon as they entered the hall, Jing Chen asked her, "Who is Zhao Wen?" Yu Shu spread out her hands and said, "I don't know." Jing Chen felt strange and asked, "Then why are you looking for him?" Yu Shu said, "I just wanted to visit the guest room in the backyard and made up a name." Hearing this answer, Jing Chen was shocked and asked, "What if there is no one named Zhao Wen?" Yu Shu said nonchalantly, "Then I'll find someone else. There are many people with the surname Zhao. If it's not Zhao Wen, then it'll be Zhao Wu or Zhao Bin. I'll be able to fool one of them." Yu Shu did not really go to find Zhao Wen. Instead, she brought Jing Chen up to the second floor. She casually knocked on a door and used the excuse of asking a guest to look around the room. She knew where the desk and bed were placed. Then, she knocked on 2 or 3 rooms to confirm the layout of the guest room before going downstairs with Jing Chen. They strolled around the first floor and finally found a spot. She pointed at the 8 to 9 feet high wall and asked Jing Chen in a low voice, "Can you use your lightness ability to jump over this wall?" Jing Chen glanced at it and said, "Sure." Yu Shu clapped her hands happily. "That's great. Let's find a place to have dinner and come back later." They went out of Peiren Training Hall and found a nearby restaurant to have some fried pancakes and hot noodle soup. They didn't leave until the restaurant was about to close. It was already late at night. There was no one on the street. Occasionally, a carriage would pass by in a hurry. Yu Shu and Jing Chen walked along the wall to avoid the wind. They went around to the back wall of Peiren Training Hall. It was pitch dark here. If it wasn't for the moonlight in the sky, they wouldn't be able to see anyone. Yu Shu raised her head and looked at the exposed floor above the wall. She found the windows facing the desk and the bed. She looked around for a while to make sure no one was around. Then she took out a stack of carefully folded notes from her bag and handed it to Jing Chen. She pointed to the top of the wall. She whispered, "You go up the wall, turn over to the other side, and from that window put these notes through the crack of the window. Put 1 note every 2 windows and 1 note every 3 windows downstairs. Don't make a mistake." Jing Chen took the stack of notes. He had internal force and night vision, so he felt it was familiar at first glance. He asked her, "Did you ask me to write this the other day?" Not long ago Yu Shu came home one day. She said that she had a way to get back the yellow frost stone, so she asked him to write an anonymous letter. Then she took an old piece of paper and asked him to add another sentence on it. She made more than 20 copies of the letter, but she didn't say what it was for. That's it." Yu Shu urged, "Hurry up, I'll keep a lookout for you. Be careful not to be seen by others." This girl didn't do anything good, but she also led Jing Chen astray. In the middle of the night, she instigated him to climb over the wall and open the window. Fortunately, Jing Chen always regarded her as kind-hearted. He knew it was inappropriate, but he didn't refuse her request. "Wait for me downstairs." Yu Shu watched as Jing Chen took a few steps back. Then, with a leap, he jumped 5 feet into the air. His feet tapped on the wall and his whole body soared up. His clothes fluttered as if he was flying. His movements were clean and beautiful. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared on the other side of the wall. Seeing him easily flip over such a high wall, Yu Shu clenched her fists in excitement. She thought to herself that when Jing Chen regained his memory in the future, she would definitely ask him for some advice. She wondered if she could still learn at such an old age. After waiting for less than 10 minutes, Jing Chen's figure appeared on top of the wall again. Yu Shu looked up and saw him jump down. She hurriedly asked in a low voice, "Did you stuff them all in?" "Yes." Yu Shu happily patted his dust. "You've worked hard. Come, let's go home." Next, she just had to wait for the examinees to wake up the next day and find the notes that were stuffed in through the window. At that time it would be interesting. Previously, in order to exchange for the yellow frost stone, she had written an anonymous letter to threaten Ji Xingxuan. In the letter, she had deliberately vaguely revealed that she was this year's examinee. Ji Xingxuan must have gone back to discuss with the old master of the Ji family. The Ji family must have determined that she was this year's examinee. For their own selfish reasons, they must not leak this question. So, if nothing unexpected happened, including her, Ji Xingxuan would still be in the top 3 of the astrology course. But they never thought that she would be so single that she would give up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She asked Jing Chen to make many copies of Yunhua Ez's test paper. Tonight, she came to the Peiren Training Hall to submit it. In addition to the solution of the question, there was another paragraph on the note, which indicated that this question was this year's astrology exam. It also threatened the examinees not to leak it to others, lest they would be killed. If a person with a normal brain received such a note, 99% of them would not say anything. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, If this matter was leaked out, they would be implicated regardless of whether it was true or not. Yushu was not worried that they would not believe it for a while. When they saw the test paper during the exam, she was not afraid that no one would copy it. She could not count on Ji Xingxuan to be in the top 3. As for whether the person who made the question in the Celestial Commissioner office would find out that the question was leaked, or whether he would pursue the matter, it was not something she needed to consider. She would leave it to the Ji family to worry about. The next day Yushu went to the Perrin training hall alone. She pretended to ask for a room and asked the manager about the guest rooms. With a few words she got the information. It was said that several guests had checked out early in the morning, and the manager was puzzled. Yushu understood in her heart that the people who checked out must have received the note this morning. They were afraid that there would be more trouble, so they sneaked away cleverly. Yushu took a book and sat in the tea room for the whole morning. When she did not hear anyone mention what happened last night, she felt relieved and left. When she returned home, Jing Chen was practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard. He was slightly sweating and holding a rough wooden sword. He opened the door. When Yushu saw him, she had an idea and called him into the house. "Greedy, wait. I'm going in to get something." Jing Chen watched her go into the house, and after a while, he came out with a long rusty sword in his hand. "Here, use this from now on." Yushu handed him the heavy sword. He took it with one hand and spun it half a circle in his hand. He raised it in front of him, and his fingers rubbed the little green marks on the sword. He was very happy. He looked up at Yushu and said, "Can I borrow it?" He still remembered that she said that they met because of this sword in Yang City. Yushu sat down across from him. She held her chin with one hand and said with a smile, "I'm giving it to you." The imperial court strictly forbade the manufacture of weapons. The blacksmiths on the market only sold hammers and kitchen knives. Only the people of Jianghu had a way to get swords and knives. Even if you had money, you couldn't buy a weapon. She happened to have this ready-made sword. Ever since she knew that Jing Chen's martial arts had recovered, she wanted to give this sword to him. Previously, his hand had not healed, and she was afraid that it would be too heavy for him to use, so she didn't give it to him. Speaking of which, the reason she and Jing Chen got to know each other was because of this ancient treasured sword. Half of the credit went to Jing Chen for her being able to steal this sword. Now that she had given it to him, it was a good thing for him. Jing Chen could vaguely sense that this sword was not an ordinary object. Seeing that Yushu was offering to give it to him, he shook his head and said, "No need. Just lend it to me." Yushu said, "What do you mean lend it to me? I'll give it to you. I don't know martial arts, so why would I need a sword?" "I don't want it." Jing Chen put the sword on the table and shook his head again. He had already received too much from her. How could he be greedy? Seeing him repeatedly refuse, Yushu was unhappy. "I said I'll give it to you. Don't be so hesitant. If you don't accept it then I'll give it back to you." As Yushu said this, she put her hand into her collar and pulled out a thin yellow ribbon. She untied it and put it on the table. There was a small green sachet hanging on the ribbon. The sachet was sewn into a ball. It was the yellow frost stone that had been lost and found not long ago. Last night, after returning from Perrin Hall, she stayed up late to sew an amulet. When she got up the next day, she originally planned to give it to Yu Xiaoxiu to get rid of bad luck for a few days. However, she got up late and Yu Xiaoxiu left early, so she hung it on her neck first. Jing Chen looked at the thing she took out and knew what it was. After thinking for a moment, he picked up the simple embroidered amulet and handed it to her. "Put it on." Jing Chen knew that the yellow frost stone was also called adversity blocking stone. From the name, it was an item that could attract good luck and avoid bad luck. He had been with Yushu for a long time. He could see that she was not very lucky and had bad luck every 2 or 3 days. So when he got this thing back that day, he gave it to her. "No." Yushu crossed her arms and looked up at the ceiling. Her face clearly showed that she was not happy. Jing Chen laughed, "I'll accept this sword." Seeing him compromise, Yushu lowered her eyelids and smiled triumphantly. She stretched out her fingers to take away the yellow frost from his palm. She lowered her head and put it on her neck. She patted her chest and said to Jing Chen, "Then I'll also accept it. When you remember that this stone has other uses, you can ask me for it. I'll give it back to you." Jing Chen picked up the rusted sword on the table and nodded to her. It was a silent agreement. Chapter 220. Yili had been taking the feng shui exam for 3 days, but Yushu did not plan to go. Instead, she stayed at home to sort out what she had learned and heard in the past 6 months, and focused on preparing for the exam of uncanny arts. Uncanny arts, as the name suggested, must be a rare or even rare art of disguise. For example, the Chiman arts, Jiazi Nain, and so on, which were usually used by the people who changed their fortune, could not be called uncanny. Only the more obscure divination arts, such as the spiritual chess scripture and the Duke of Zhou's dream interpretation, could be considered uncanny. However, the scope of the exam for uncanny arts was not limited to the content of a specific uncanny art. The questions were usually about current affairs and focused more on application, so the questions were often tricky. For example, Yu Shu had seen in the Dian dossier over the years that there was a question that asked the examinees to predict the top 3 of the year's imperial examination. The time limit was 5 days and the examinees were allowed to go home to answer. Once the 5 days were up, they had to go to the Taiching department to submit their papers. This kind of open book exam had advantages and disadvantages for Yu Shu. The advantage was that she was good at the application of Yi Li, but the disadvantage was that it benefited the examinees who had a backdoor. For example, people like Ji Xingxuan, who came from an aristocratic family of Yi Li and had elders who were proficient in Yi Li, helping them to plan in the dark. This was not considered cheating. In other words, this subject was the most unfair among the 6 subjects of the Dian. It was the subject with the most tricks. The examinees did not compete on knowledge but on family background. Because of this, there were very few people who participated in this subject. Most of them had some family background, and they relied on this subject to get a good ranking in exchange for the title of Teacher E, to act as a facade. However, there was no lack of people with real talent among them. For example, Yunhua Ez, who appeared out of nowhere, took the first place in the uncanny arts, and forcibly suppressed the children of the aristocratic families, not allowing them to show their faces. That was called boldness. Because of the leak in the astrology subject, Yu Shu did not plan to take it again. Now, among the 6 subjects, she had the most confidence in the uncanny arts and mathematics. Mathematics was a special subject, and it was also given a title. If she could not get into the top 3, it would be a waste. In this way, if she wanted to enter the Taisher library, she had to take the subject of the strange arts. At the very least, she had to enter the 100 yuan. Otherwise, she wouldn't even be able to get the title of Teacher E. There were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in this grand examination. Who could guarantee that there wouldn't be another Master Easy? She didn't have full confidence that she would be able to enter the top 3. If she got the 4th or 5th place, she would have gotten the title of Master E for nothing. If she wasn't even a Master E, then she wouldn't be able to enter the gates of Taisher Library. These days there were things that gave Yu Shu headaches, but there were also things that made her happy. Ever since the yellow frost stone returned to her hands, the successive disasters around her showed signs of abating. After a few days, Yu Shu found that sometimes she didn't have to deliberately avoid them. Those small disasters that she had predicted earlier were inadvertently resolved. For example, half a month ago, she predicted that she would have a patient on the first day of the first year. She did suffer from the cold in the examination hall for the whole morning, but when she got home, she drank a bowl of ginger soup, wrapped herself in a blanket, and slept. Another example was that she predicted that she would lose money on the 3rd day of the first year. In the end, when she went to Changchun Street to watch the execution, she got a little drunk in a restaurant and left her purse on the table. However, Jing Chen saw it, and in the end she didn't lose a single copper coin. Another example was this morning when she got up to cook, she tripped at the kitchen door. When she got up and went into the kitchen to add firewood to start the fire, the pot hanging on the door finally fell with a clang. It was a scare but not a real danger. Such an immediate effect made Yu Shu pleasantly surprised. She repeatedly sighed that the yellow frost stone was indeed a good treasure. In the past she really didn't know what it was. She didn't lose anything by exchanging EZ's test paper for it. Yu Shu carried the amulet made from the yellow frost stone for 2 days. She hung it on Jing Chen in front of Yu Xiaoxiu. She didn't hide it from him. Jing Chen didn't say anything, but Yu Xiaoxiu vaguely heard them talking about this stone before. He knew it was a treasure. When Yu Shu hung it on him, he took it off and gave it to her. As an elder sister, she always put her younger brother first. Naturally, the younger brother also cared about his elder sister. In the heart of Yu Xiaoxiu, as long as Yu Shu was good, he would be good. Yu Shu had said all kinds of soft and hard words, but Yu Xiaoxiu still refused to wear the amulet. She had no choice but to not go too far in front of Jing Chen. In private, she knocked on Yu Xiaoxiu's head several times and hung it on his neck. Yu Xiu finally submitted to Yu Shu's violence and wore it reluctantly. "Why are you pouting? I didn't give it to you. Take it off for me when I take the exam in a few days." Yu Shu rubbed Yu Xiaoxiu's head and said angrily, "You don't even know that you are good to you." "Really? Yu Xiaoxiu snorted, touched the amulet in his collar and asked Yu Shu, "Sister, when will Brother Shui come back?" When Yu Shu heard the words Big Brother Shui, she went silent, and the blurry figure of Shui Rui's back when he left that night appeared in her mind. Moreover, when he lightly descended on her shoulder, it caused her to have an extremely uncomfortable feeling in her heart. She'd rather have a falling out with him than have such an ambiguous attitude. Who knew if he would forgive her or not listen to her after he heard her confession? She didn't have any confidence in Shui Rui at all. "I don't know. Didn't he promise to take you to ride horses? He should come to you when he comes back." Yu Shu perfunctorily answered Yu Xiaoxiu, but in her heart she thought that Shui Rui had better forget about it. Otherwise, when they met, she didn't know how embarrassing it would be. "You must be hungry. Sister will cook. Let's eat egg pancakes tonight." In winter, ordinary people didn't have much to eat. The best they could do was to eat meat, then fish and eggs. Yu Xiaoxiu said, "Then make 2 more pancakes and heat them up for breakfast tomorrow morning." "Okay, let's go. Help me." Since the day Ji Xingxuan lost the yellow frost stone in Changchun Fang, Ji Huaishan had been sending people to inquire about the nearby area, trying to find the person. However, after 7 or 8 days there was no result. Ji Xingxuan lost the thing she loved and felt uncomfortable for several days, but she didn't show it in front of Ji Huaishan. She had to participate in all 6 subjects of the Dian examination, so she had to work harder than others. After 2 subjects she lost a lot of weight. Ji Huaishan loved his granddaughter dearly. 3 times a day he ordered the housekeeper to send supplements to her courtyard. In order to make her happy, he spent a lot of money to buy a pair of colorful parrots that could talk and sing as a gift. After yesterday's feng shui exam, Ji Xingxuan rested at home, waiting for the next subject. Last night she spent half the night watching the stars, so she woke up a little late in the morning. The pair of parrots stood side by side in the bird cage. From the living room they could be heard chirping, "Lucky star shines, fortune rolls in. Lucky star shines, fortune rolls in." It was a cold day, so the stove in the room was burning brightly. Ji Xingxuan was helped up by 2 servant girls. After washing up, she drank a cup of white fungus to get rid of the bitter taste in her mouth. Carrying the hand stove, she walked to the living room. Breakfast had just been placed on the table. There was porridge and hot dishes, a small plate of peeled quail eggs and a bowl of steaming fresh goat's milk. As soon as she woke up, Ji Xingxuan didn't have much of an appetite. After drinking half a bowl of porridge, she washed her hands and rinsed her mouth. Then she took a small plate of peeled peanuts and fed them to the parrots. The pair of birds were also clever. Seeing that there was good food, they fought to be the first to say auspicious words. Their sweet words made Ji Xingxuan smile for the first time that morning. The head servant Yun He reminded her, "Miss, don't feed them too much at once. The birds can't eat too much." This servant girl Yun He had served Ji Xingxuan for 3 years. She was assigned to her by Ji Huaishan after she was selected to enter the Imperial Historian's Library and came to the capital to study. She was skilled in both literature and martial arts. She was reliable in her work and was older than Ji Xingxuan by 2 years. As a result, Ji Xingxuan treated her differently from the other servant girls and was willing to listen to her. And Ji Xingxuan handed the plate to Yun He and was about to go to the study to read when she heard someone panting outside the curtain. Miss, Master has sent this servant to summon you to the front courtyard. Someone from Yang City has arrived." Hearing this, Ji Xingxuan hurriedly gestured for the servant girl to roll up the curtain to let the person in. She asked, "Who has arrived?" "It's third master, second young master and young master Ma's entire family. I heard that young master Ma has been promoted and is going to the capital to be an official." The errand boy replied excitedly. "Is that so? My little aunt is also here?" Ji Xingxuan stood up. Her face, which was not covered by a veil, clearly showed a happy expression. She turned to Yun He and said, "Go get a cloak and come with me to the front courtyard." "Yes." Yun He saw that she was full of energy again, so she responded with a smile. She ran into the room and picked out a blue furry cloak. She draped it over Ji Yunshu's body and tidied her hair. Then she helped Ji Yunshu out of the room and hurried to the front courtyard. When the pair of parrots in the cage saw that everyone had left and there was no more peanuts to eat, they flapped their wings and kicked over the small dish on the bamboo pole with a ding-dang sound. The millet grains inside the dish spilled out and fell onto the ground. Mrs. Lucky, Mrs. Lucky. On the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, Yu Shu went to Tai Qingxi's house early in the morning. Tai Qingxi looked at the notice. The astrology exam was set on the 9th day of the Lunar New Year. There was also a physiognomy exam after that. On the way back, she deliberately passed by Autumn Osmanthus Lane and went to Fuan Escort Agency. Zhao Qinghui was out, but his uncle, Boss Zhou, was there. When Yu Shu came, he warmly invited her to the tea room. He lit the stove and served her tea. The two of them sat and chatted for a while. This was the first serious business that Yu Shu had gotten from setting up a stall in Autumn Osmanthus Square. The red packet of 20 taels a month was not a lot, but the escort agency rarely looked for her if there was nothing important. Last month, she decided to take the Dian exam, so she told Boss Zhou about it. At that time, Boss Zhou politely gave her 50 taels as a gift, but Yu Shu tactfully declined. Recently, Fuan Escort Agency was smooth sailing. After sitting for a while, Yu Shu got up and said goodbye. Boss Zhou knew that she was preparing for the exam, so he did not ask her to stay for dinner. He said that after she finished the exam, he would treat her to a drink. Yu Shu walked back to Huaxing Street. It was almost noon, but Jing Chen was alone at home. She was wondering if she should buy food or cook for lunch when she heard someone shouting behind her. "Little brother, slow down. Can I ask you something?" Yu Shu turned around and saw a carriage stopped not far from the street. The coachman was waving at her. The other party spoke with a southern accent, so she took the initiative to walk forward. The coachman smiled at her and said, "I'm asking for directions. How do I go back to Huaxing Street?" Yu Shu pointed to the street behind her and said, "This is it." "Thank you. You're welcome." Yu Shu saw that there was nothing else for her to do, so she turned around and walked away. Behind her, she heard the coachman's report, "Master, this is Huaxing Street. The road is narrow and the carriage can't go in. Do you want me to go inside and ask for directions?" "No need, let's get off and walk." At first, Yu Shu thought the voice in the carriage was familiar. After walking for more than 10 steps, she curiously looked back. But when she saw it, she suddenly stopped. Chapter 221. Yu Shu's eyes were not deceived. The people who came down from the carriage were Zhao Hui, Pei Jing, and He Fangji. Hui and Huai. When Yu Shu saw who they were, she immediately shouted and ran towards them. Her face was full of surprise. Pei Jing and He Fangji were persuading Zhao Hui to wait in the carriage while they went to look for Yu Shu. When they heard the shout, they turned their heads and saw Yu Shu running towards them. They did not recognize her at first, but when they were in front of her, they suddenly realized who it was. "Xiao Yu." Zhao Hui let go of He Fangji's hand and reached out to Yu Shu. She hugged her, not caring about her bulging belly. He Fangji panicked and repeatedly said, "Slow down." But how could Zhao Hui listen to him? Hugging Yu Shu, she cried tears of joy. Choking with emotion, she said, good child, it's good that you're fine, it's good that you're fine, thank the heavens." A few months ago, when Zhao Hui heard the news from the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce that a merchant ship had been robbed and all the merchants on board had been killed, she fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she could not believe that Yu Shu and her brother had lost their lives. She begged Pei Jing to go to Kaifeng Prefecture. When she found out that they were dead, Zhao Hui could not eat or drink and almost lost the child she was pregnant with. Under He Fangji's careful care, Zhao Hui finally accepted the death of Yu Shu and her brother with great difficulty. However, 3 months later, Pei Jing received a letter from the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce in the capital, asking him to bring his family to the capital. The letter also stated that Yu Shu and Qiu Biao had embezzled what was supposed to be their property and had been exposed for murder. Pei Jing guessed that Yu Shu had escaped death. After informing Zhao Hui, the latter, after discussing with Dr. He and his mother, resolutely decided to go to the capital with Pei Jing to find them. Even if the two siblings were still alive. Because they had left half a month earlier, they did not receive the letter that Yu Shu had sent to Yang. They arrived in the capital the day before yesterday. Fortunately, Pei Jing had some connections in the capital. After looking around, he found the yamen. On the day that the case of the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce was heard, Yu Shu, as a witness, had left her address at the yamen. As soon as Pei Jing heard about it, he immediately brought Zhao Hui and her husband to find her. That was why there was the part where the coachman asked for directions. When Zhao Hui saw with her own eyes that Yu Shu was safe and sound, a large stone in her heart was lifted. She wrapped one arm around her and used the other to affectionately brush the stray hair in front of Yu Shu's forehead. She wanted to hug her and kiss her a few times. Yu Shu also felt a lump in her throat. 10 months ago, she fell into the sea and transmigrated to the ancient times, losing her parents and brother. If Yu Xiaoxiu was her spiritual sustenance, then Zhao Hui was her emotional support. Although the two weren't as close as mother and daughter, they weren't that far off. When she left Yang that day, the person she couldn't bear to part with the most was Zhao Hui. A few months ago she had narrowly escaped death. She was afraid of Zhao Hui's power, so she didn't dare to contact Zhao Hui for fear of bringing trouble to her. "Aunt Hui, why did you run all the way to the capital? And what about Dr. He and Grandma He?" Yushu still didn't know that Zhao Hui hadn't received the letter she sent. "She's still in Yang City. We've hired someone to take care of her." Zhao Hui was very happy. After suffering came happiness. She now had a caring husband and an open-minded mother-in-law. Dr. He smiled and comforted his beloved wife. "All right, it's good that she's fine. Now you can be at ease, right?" "And I'm at ease, I'm at ease." "Yes, yes, yes, yes," Zhao Hui repeatedly said. Pei Jing patted Yushu's shoulder and was filled with emotion. "I knew that you, this child, had a tough life. It's been hard on you. I didn't think that Bai Qing, that servant, was a beast in human skin. It was my negligence to let you follow them to the capital and cause you to suffer for nothing." Yushu hurriedly said, "It was them who did evil, how can I blame you?" Pei Jing had gone to pay a visit to the head of the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce yesterday and heard the inside story of Bai Qing and Qiu Biao. He knew that Yushu had played a role in this. He secretly sighed. That day Bai Qiu hadn't been able to harm Yushu. Now he was controlled by her and lost his life. However, he wasn't surprised at the fate of Qiu Biao and Qiu Biao. When Yushu helped Zhao Hui to sue the Dou family's Ji family, he could see that this junior was a vicious person who would take revenge for any grievances. However, he heard that this case could be resolved so smoothly and that there was even a noble person who helped from the side. What made him curious was, where did Yushu get to know this noble person? Fangji's heart ached for Zhao Hui. He said to Yushu, "Let's not stand on the street. Let's find a warm place to sit and talk. Your Aunt Hui is pregnant and can't stand for a long time." Yushu now discovered that under Zhao Hui's clothes, her abdomen was bulging. She was so shocked that her eyes turned round. She stammered, "Hui. And Hui you?" Zhao Hui nodded. Her expression was soft and somewhat bashful. She lightly glared at Dr. He and said to Yushu, "It's almost 5 months. It won't be a problem. This child knows her place." Yushu curiously touched Zhao Hui's abdomen through the thick cotton clothes. She carefully held her arm and said to the 3 people, "The place I live now is too narrow. It can't fit anyone. There's a tea house on the street next door. Let's go there." In fact, Yushu thought that Jing Chen was at home. It wasn't that she didn't want them to know of Jing Chen's existence, but that Zhao Hui was pregnant now. It was not good for anything to happen to her. If Jing Chen did something to her and something happened to her, it would all be her responsibility. It would be too late even if she cried. Zhao Hui heard Yushu's words and saw that she was even thinner than when she left Yang. She thought that she was living in a bad place and was not living well. Her heart ached for her. She warmly said, "Tomorrow I'll get the doctor to arrange a bigger house for you." Pei Jing said, "Why go through so much trouble? Tonight all of you can stay at my place." Yushu still had Jing Chen at home. How could she leave with them? She quickly changed the topic. "Let's find a place to sit down first." "Yes, let's get in the carriage." Thus, the few of them took the carriage to the tea house that Yushu mentioned. Yushu and Zhao Hui sat in the tea house for the whole afternoon. Yushu told them everything that happened after she escaped from the ship. She even talked about Jing Chen's part, but she left out the parts that could not be mentioned. For example, Jing Chen's K-star was something that could not be mentioned. She did not even mention half a word about Yu Xiaoxiu. Listening to her talk about the dangerous escape that night, Zhao Hui was so scared that her face turned pale. Dr. He was a hot-tempered person. He slapped the table and angrily scolded Bai Qing and Qiu Biao. Pei Jing, on the other hand, was more interested in Jing Chen. "You said that this young Master Jing who escaped with you, do you know him from before?" Yushu looked at Zhao Hui and brought up an old story. Jing Chen had a martial arts competition. That day, when Aunt Hui was on the verge of death, I asked him to help raise enough money for Aunt Hui's medical fees. Hearing this, Pei Jing looked suspicious as if he had vaguely thought of something. Zhao Hui said emotionally, "If that's the case, I should go see this young Master Jing personally." "Where is he now?" Yushu hesitated. He's living with me in Xiaoxiu now." Zhao Hui was stunned. "Living with you?" Before she could finish, Pei Jing suddenly slammed the table and stared at Yushu with glowing eyes. He blurted out, "You and that young Master Jing are the beggars and Taoists of Wanxiang Street?" Pei Jing was talking about Yushu and Jing Chen gambling in the Baoran casino owned by the Ji family. They won 43 rounds in a day and almost destroyed the reputation of the Ji family's casino, causing a sensation in the entire Wanxiang street. Yushu smiled and nodded. This time there was no need to hide it. She had participated in the Diyan examination. After she passed the mathematics exam, her name would be on the roll. She would definitely reveal what she had learned. Instead of surprising them at that time, it was better to let them know first. Haha. Pei Jing laughed out loud. He was excited to see the prey. I was wondering why you thought of pretending to be that beggar when you complained on behalf of Huinyang. When I asked you, you didn't admit it. Xiao Yu, you're really good at hiding things. After sighing, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. To think that I wanted to take you as my apprentice. I'm so ashamed that I almost made a fool of myself. Yushu said seriously, Uncle Pei, you're too humble. I learned accounting from you in Tihan and learned a lot. I've already considered you as half a teacher. Pei Jing was pleased to hear this. He thought of another question and was about to ask it when Dr. He interrupted, What is beggars and Taoists? Pei Jing saw that Zhao Hui was also confused. He was happy to tell them about Yushu's exploits. He studied mathematics and was also a businessman. He looked favorably on people who were good at calculations. That was why he recruited Yushu to work in Tihan. Taoist? Is that young Master Jing a Taoist? Zhao Hui exclaimed. As a commoner, she had an instinctive reverence for Taoists who had a high status. Yushu waved her hand. No, he's just pretending. He's a Jianghu man, a chivalrous warrior. Jing Chen's identity as a Taoist could not be revealed. It was not that she did not believe in Zhao Hui, her husband, and Pei Jing, but if this matter was revealed, it would implicate Jing Chen's memory loss. Otherwise, how could a Taoist master end up living with a commoner and almost getting killed? Yushu did not want too many people to know about Jing Chen's memory loss. Firstly, she did not want others to see him in a different light. Secondly, she did not want Zhao Hui to worry. As for Yushu's words, Zhao Hui did not doubt it at all. She breathed a sigh of relief and said, Where are you staying? I want to thank young Master Jing personally. Zhao Hui had a thought. She felt that it was inappropriate for a girl like Yushu to live with a man, even if there was Yu Xiaoxiu among them. Yushu looked at the dark sky outside and said, It's too late now. And Hui, it's not convenient for you to walk around. You should go back first and leave your address. I'll bring Xiaoxiu over tomorrow. She did not mention that she would not allow Zhao Hui to see Jing Chen, but she also did not say that she would go with Jing Chen tomorrow. Zhao Hui had been out for a long time. After hearing Yushu's words, she felt that her waist was a bit sore. It had not been easy for her to conceive this child and she had almost lost it. She had been rushing all the way to the capital. If it wasn't for Dr. He's attentive care, her body would not have been able to endure it. Although she was reluctant to part with Yushu, she knew that there would be plenty of time in the future. As long as she was safe and sound, she did not care about this short period of time. Thus, Lu Jing called for the waiter to come in and settle the bill. The three of them left the private room and walked to the door. Pei Jing suddenly turned his head and asked, Xiao Yu, did you take the exam for this year's Great Yen examination? Yushu almost forgot about this. After he asked, she remembered, I did. Pei Jing happily said, That's good. With your ability, you should be able to rank among the best in mathematics. I'll wait to hear your good news. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask Uncle Pei. Yushu thanked him and saw them off to the carriage. She watched them drive away and then happily left. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.